Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, episode 75. I'm Steve Smith, along with Brandon Flanagan. We're coming to you from a rainy Boynton Beach, Florida. We're sitting in the FM Tennis Performance Center. And tonight, we're going to interview Mark Walpole. Like Brandon and myself, we can identify with Mark as a trench pro, a fellow trench pro. I think it's great to talk to someone who's out there teaching forehands and backhands. Mark's English. He first came to the United States, played college tennis. He found his way to the program I ran, where you could get a degree in tennis teaching, comprehensive curriculum degree program for students seeking occupational competency for tennis teaching pro managers.
It's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. I always wanted to say that. Actually, Mark and I have a connection to Vic Braden. For 6 weeks, along with the Braden staff, I had the pleasure of teaching Chevy Chase. Mark has been in Southern California. You and Mark can talk about Southern California, South Florida, two hot spots for tennis. He's been there since 1990. Besides a background in tennis, very in-depth, long history in tennis, he actually has worked in the real estate business as well. But he's not one of those tennis teachers who left tennis to be in real estate. How's it go that some people in real estate want to be in tennis and people in tennis want to be in real estate?
Something like that.
He at one time bought the Vic Braden Tennis College. Right before Mark bought it, we could talk about it was really sad, even though I have so much respect for Balotelli. But at one time, it was just a little disturbing to me for many reasons. Is the Braden Tennis College, Cote de Casa, it was called the Braden Balotelli Tennis College. A fellow Englishman, Dave Secker, spent a lot of time in Southern Cali. He's been a guest on our podcast. He's never met Mark, but he told me this about Mark. He said he's either the best or one of the best tennis teachers in Southern California. And he makes a comment that Andy Fitzell mentions all the time is, just let me see their students hit the ball. It's like Vic Braden would say, let me see the worst kid in the program, the kid who takes the ice cream cone and puts it in the middle of the forehead. How do they hit a ball? With Mark, straight shooter. So he's been in the wonderland of Disney for decades. But again, a trench pro, somebody who's spent years and years teaching tennis, and it'd be interesting to have the listeners hear what he has to say. Anything you want to add? Or you got an English partner?
I do, yeah, Allington Mutimer.
So you probably understand Mark's accent.
Definitely the better half of this relationship. I kind of almost got the part of the country on the head. I almost nailed it on the head when we talked to him earlier before this.
We'll have to ask him.
You were impressed by that, weren't you, Steve?
Yeah, I'm impressed with everything you do, Flanagan. Just upstate New York guys, you know.
I'm blushing for those of you listening on Spotify.
With Mark Walpole, ringing the phone. If my phone were to work, this is where I get nervous. I don't hear a ring. Maybe it's only 3 seconds in.
Hi, Steve.
Marky, baby, we got you.
Yeah, you made it. It's California time.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle.
Mark Walpole, we got you without even hearing a ring. That's amazing.
Okay. Well,
on this end of it. With, Mark, let's get started. Our podcasts are not known to be 3 minutes long, so without any
beverage and a snack and maybe a couple other things to get you through this. But thanks for joining us.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no problem. Good to be with you.
Interesting enough, people tell us they don't mind the length of the podcast. 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, while you're driving the car or doing some chores around the house.
Yeah, go do a power walk.
Our last one was about 3 hours and 15, so we thought we'd try to up it to about 4 hours and 15, if that's okay with you this time.
I think it's like just go but 1 minute higher, 3 minutes and 16 seconds.
Keep adding
Actually, something I learned from Vic Braden was he was telling us about a pole vaulter he worked with, and he couldn't get over the fact that the guy wanted the bar to go up like a quarter of an inch each time. And he was clearing the bar by like a foot, and Vic couldn't figure it out. And the way it was is every time he broke his record, the world record, he got a bonus. So he's like, whatever the minimum was, put it up half an inch.
Wow.
And back in the day, I mean, he was maybe track and field athletes have never been paid accordingly, but he would get like, $5,000.
Yeah, Vic was into every sport. He had a story about every single sport, I think.
No, for sure. Tell us your beginning days in tennis.
Well, I'm from the no problem. I'm from the northeast of England, which is obviously not a hotbed for tennis, but I grew up in Yorkshire, which is the biggest county in England. It's on the northeast coast. And how I got started with tennis, I actually lived right next door to 3 shale courts. Back in those days, they had these courts that were made of shale, and there was a big wooden fence. And I was like 9, 10. I just loved hitting that ball against that wooden fence, driving the adult. It was an adult club. There was no juniors. So it would drive all the adult members nuts when they were trying to play matches at nighttime, just hearing this wooden ball hitting this wooden fence. And finally, the smart guy just invited me in and said, look, we're going to give you a job to, roll the courts, water the courts. And so I got paid £1 for rolling and getting the courts ready every evening for match play. And that's how I kind of got started. They let me in and I started playing doubles. And, there was only probably 10 courts in the whole city, in the whole town. And I lived literally next door to the 3. And, it was all adult tennis. There's not many juniors around, just myself and a couple of other guys around, and would jump in, play doubles, and that's how we learned, self-taught. So we were all pretty good servers, pretty good volleyers, and then we outgrew that club and we moved up to the bigger club at the other end of town that were building some indoor courts. So that's how it started.
When we introduced you, we mentioned Dave Secker, who compliments you, fellow Englishman who's never met you, but he just complimented you the way your students hit the ball. He told me to ask you, is Hull the most beautiful place in the world?
Is where?
Hull, isn't that Hull? Where are you from?
No, I'm from the northeast. That is the northeast, but that's a little bit more south.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in the town of Middlesbrough, which is a very industrial town. Hardworking, salt of the earth people. Probably the poorest part of the country. It's 250 miles north of London, probably maybe 100 miles, south of Scotland. So we are right up there, closer to Scotland than the south.
I played a lot of tennis with Richard Bird. Richard
right.
went by the name Squire, and he was from Huddersfield. So I spent time in Huddersfield. How far is that?
Not too far. Probably about maybe 70 miles, 60, 70 miles, hour and a half. Take an hour and a half up the coast there. That's right in the middle of Yorkshire. I'm the very north of Yorkshire.
Did you play other sports growing up as well?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, obviously, football, soccer in England. Where I grew up is really the big thing. Everyone's mad about their football, and it really is sort of a hotbed for football up in the northeast of England. That's where many of the great players are from, and so we all played football. And other sports in summer, we had some cricket, obviously a little bit of rugby. Those are all school sports that you participated in. But tennis became as I got a little older and started playing a lot more, particularly in the summer or throughout the winter. Tennis sort of took over at about 15, where it became full tennis, and the football started to fall off. But yeah, all different sports though.
County tennis is
county tennis, right? Yes, very competitive. And Yorkshire's probably one of the strongest counties. But then where I grew up, the county lines changed, and it became Cleveland and Durham. So that was a much easier county to play for versus Yorkshire. It was quite hard to play for Yorkshire because they had big cities like Leeds and Sheffield and like all those, York and all those different cities that, you had quite a bit of tennis and you had quite a bit of history with tennis. Some big tournaments, like one of the biggest ones is Ilkley, where it's a fantastic club, 20 grass courts, beautiful centre grass court, and everybody played Ilkley in the summer. And you had a nice circuit of grass court tennis in the summer all around Yorkshire, where you had, you could play under 14s, 16s, 21s, men's opens, and they even had some, pretty decent money tournaments. So yeah, it was quite strong, Yorkshire tennis.
Were the juniors playing team tennis, representing the county, playing against seniors?
You wouldn't. No, yeah, sometimes if the junior was good enough, but typically the county team would be made up of some guys that were full time, and then maybe some guys that were coaches that were ex-players. But sometimes you'd get like a 17, 18-year-old that would get invited. But it was quite hard to go play a county week. You'd have to be, quite a top player.
Were there any opportunities for you to see professional tennis as you were growing up in England?
Oh yeah, we'd take the bus down to Wimbledon at 2:00 in the morning. It would take us about probably 7-8 hours on the bus, and we'd get there and we'd queue up at 4:00 in the morning, and would spend the whole day at Wimbledon. So yeah, as a kid, we that was huge, because sometimes we were, you can actually queue up to get into Wimbledon and pay on the door if you get there early enough. Mm-hmm. They open the gates there at 11:00, and if you get there by 4 in the morning, you'll definitely get in. So yeah, we did that. We did that. Kind of crazy now, but we were 13 years old, 14 when we would do that on our own.
I know. One time at Wimbledon, maybe they still do it. If you were to leave early, you hand your ticket in. I'm not sure if they resell it for a lesser price or if they give it away. Do you know how that works? Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they do it anymore, but with security now. But that was for sure. We would do that all the time. Guy would come out. He'd watch one match. He'd be heading back to the city of London, and he'd just give us the ticket. Mm-hmm. We were maybe already in the stadium, already in the grounds by then, but we would get a centre court that way, and we'd spend all day there till the last match was off. So fantastic, good times. McEnroe. I actually was able to see McEnroe and Jimmy Connors and all those guys back in the early to mid 80s.
In one of our podcasts, we talked about the artwork that Brandon has on the wall at the FM Performance Center. And there's a great one of McEnroe at Wimbledon. So bad, but so good.
Yeah. Sports Illustrated cover.
How about some of the matches come to your memory from being at Wimbledon?
McEnroe playing Chris Lewis final. Chris Lewis is a local coach here now from New Zealand. I just remember that match because it was just he came from non-seeded, and I really liked his game, serving volley guy, and I think McEnroe actually the next year. I think I was at this match. I remember. I think McEnroe beat him maybe 0-1 or something like that. The following year, I think it was first round. He got him again. I may be wrong, but it just that sort of sticks out. But obviously, the Borg McEnroe match. I remember sitting and just watching it from start to end and just being mesmerized by it. And obviously, Borg was he was my idol as a kid, and just the way you hit a tennis ball, and just I don't know. Those were the days for me in tennis. Those were the glory days. And
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that was '83. I remember being in Germany teaching tennis, watching Chris Lewis play. Very quickly. There used to be an American really good player, Chris Lewis. So it was Chris Lewis, New Zealand, Chris Lewis, America.
Yeah.
And there was if you remember back in, I think 1979. There was a movie called Players, and Dean Martin's son, who was a very good tennis player, lost his life in a plane crash. But he was a star, along with Ally McGraw. So I was teaching tennis for All American Sports, and there was a qualifier in the Final Four. Obviously, got into the main draw. But they gave Dino, which didn't exist at the time, gave him a wild card. So that meant to the 4 players in the qualies, they had to play another match, and then if the 2 players who won were straight in, but then there had to be a consolation match, so whoever finished 4th was out. These players were so upset. But I remember watching one of my co-workers being in the chair and saw how the players were really being abusive. And Judy Hodges played at Colgate, so I knew I had to take stand. So these two Chris Lewises, they wanted extra time to warm up, and I just said, 1 minute, please. But they were so irate. But So that's a movie, if people could dig that out, that has McEnroe's in it, Vilas. Vilas wins it. It's on grass. I remember McEnroe going, it was definitely a movie. Vilas would never win on grass.
Mm.
With tell us about the word squad. I mean, when I say of squad training, I think of British tennis.
Yeah, that's sort of, I think maybe it came from, back in the day, there was so few courts, particularly indoor courts in the UK. Now they've done much better. David Lloyd, he has his tennis centers all over the country, and there's usually a tennis center in pretty much every decent sized town. But back in the day, for example, the first indoor facility within about an hour drive from where I grew up was an aircraft hangar that a guy called Terry Mabbott, took over, and he built 4 indoor courts in an old aircraft hangar. So, so if you think of all the tennis players within an hour or an hour and a half, how are we going to play tennis? So I think that's how that squad type training was developed. I may be wrong there, but I'm guessing that's how it was developed, because we would all get together and just do sessions. Say there's 4 courts, there was maybe 15 or 20 of us, and we'd run a session as a squad. So it was just so hard to get any kind of court time back in those days. Like I said, I had to take a train about an hour to get just maybe 2 or 3 hours of indoor court time. So during the winter, anytime there was a little bit of sun, and we could get on the courts, we'd take it. We'd brush snow off the courts. We'd do anything to get out and hit tennis balls. So
I think we could ask you about playing tarmac. But back to Brandon.
Yeah.
Touch upon grass. How much of your junior tennis did you actually play on grass?
Oh, in the summertime, I would say 50% of it. They had grass, but then they had a lot of synthetic grass. In the summertime, we would do a lot, and when I say grass, it's not the greatest grass. Sometimes you'd get the opportunity to play on like a center court where at a nice club, and the grass would be fantastic. But the grass, a lot of times, in the wintertime, it would be a field hockey. In the summertime, they would, cut the grass and do as good a job as they could and put the nets up and the lines, and you'd be playing on some kind of nutty grass that, the ball barely bounced. So all you're going to do is come in. So, I played a lot of grass court tennis and synthetic grass court tennis. Even a lot of the indoor courts were synthetic grass.
You always think of grass being a tennis teacher, clay's a tennis teacher.
Yeah.
And, we in the States so many times just play on hard court. When we were studying tennis together, did you meet a British gal by the name of Mandy Nall? Was she there when you were there, or maybe not?
Maybe not, Steve. It doesn't ring a bell.
So I was there during the time of 3 different coaches. So in between coaches, I ran the program, the team on an interim basis. And anyway, was a British gal, and there was only one token American on the team, but the rest of the girls were from Scandinavian countries. But it was interesting that her game, she could come to the net and volley. She could play. Oh,
I do remember her. Yes, I do remember her.
Play underspin approach shot, and where, granted, now in Scandinavian countries, I've been told that I've been there in so many years, but they're playing so much on indoor hard. But it used to always be outdoor red clay and indoor carpet, which is With
I mean, we were so desperate to play that we even had an indoor basketball court. So you can imagine an indoor gym, and playing on a basketball court. We put a net up and we'd go out and play doubles. And so you can imagine trying to return serve on a basketball court.
On a wooden surface, right?
on a wood surface.
For the longest time at the Queen's Club, maybe they still do, but they have wooden courts.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's, I worked at one college for 10 years, another one for 15. But a lot of times, they're not so flexible in letting you use the gym. But people asked me at one point that you and I were in Tyler, Texas, is I had access to a private school, and they had 2 gyms, and we had those heavy duty nets. One was a tartan rubberized surface, and the other one was on wood. and we would go in and play on wood. There's probably no better way to teach a kid to have a short, compact swing on a return to serve.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, fish on the back end.
With tell us again, Terry Babbitt. What? How do you know him?
Terry Mabbitt. Terry Mabbitt.
Yeah.
And Mabbitt, yeah, he started a club, and he, like I said, he built a club from an aircraft hangar in a town called, it was actually a Teesside airport, and that was sort of the first indoor facility in the whole region. And he actually later became the Scottish national coach.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I actually met him because people were talking to me about bringing or sending students to the U.S. to study to be tennis teachers. But I remember it, and he wrote a book as well. I remember having a copy of his book. Yeah, he
was good. He was good. He was actually a better squash player than, and he was like a top squash player. And the facility that he built, had. We had 5 or 6 indoor, and then he had some squash courts, and then he had a bubble on the side for an extra tennis court, and he's really a lifer. He was. Now I look back and think, wow, he really was a kind of a fantastic guy, because he there was a need for it, and he went for it. And I'm not sure if he quite made it, financially and what have you, and it was a tough place to do it, because the tennis business is quite hard. But I remember later on he did get the national job for Scotland, and I wonder. I don't know, because I've been gone so long. I wonder if he had much to do with Judy Murray and that whole group.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah,
I spent a lot of time in England, Wales, Scotland, even Ireland for that matter. But remember years and years ago, the tennis players could play squash.
That's right.
We talked about Harry Ottman. He wanted his tennis players to play squash with their opposite hand so they wouldn't have imbalance injuries. You see Federer dig a ball out of the corner.
Yeah.
He could, way out of the corner. We see kids doing it before they even get in the alley. They're trying to get a squash shot.
Well, look, it's just racket skills. Anytime you get a racket in your hand, and I think we've kind of lost a little bit of that in tennis, especially we'll get into that a little bit later, especially with the way the kids are holding rackets and swinging rackets, that it just becomes, kids are hitting the back fence on balls, and it's like no big deal, It's like, anyway.
So from British tennis, you first came to the U.S. because of college.
Yeah, I came to play some junior college tennis. I had a friend that I kind of tagged along with, and he actually ended up playing for, remember the day that in Texas, they had a lot of junior college tennis. I'm not sure if they still have as many, but he ended up playing at a school called Paris. And I didn't get on that team, but I found a way to get on a team in Corsicana, Texas, Navarro College. Just, again, a small little junior college. And I played there for a year. And, as I was, playing some of the schools, like we play like schools like Midland and some schools in Waco and different types of schools, I was hearing more about tennis tech. I met a couple of English guys that, were playing college tennis, and we're chatting away like, hey, what are you doing? What's your plan? And some of the guys are like, well, I think I'll go back to England and start coaching, or this sort of thing. And anyway, tennis tech kept coming up, and my idea was, I'd like to make a living out of tennis. And at that point I was about 19, and I felt like, I need to get on with this. I'm from a, part of the world, or my parents would be like, hey, you got to get started working. So that was important. So, I signed up. To paint a picture here, Brandon, is, tennis tech, we literally showed up. I don't know if you remember those days, Steve, particularly the foreign guys like myself, would show up and we had nowhere to live. And so Steve would show up at the tennis courts and basically tell us, hey, listen, just try to find some guys and try to find a place to live. And so, me and a few of the foreign guys, there's a guy from Taiwan and there's a guy from Puerto Rico, we literally rented a hotel room and stayed in the hotel for a few nights until we could rent a 1-bedroom and basically lived on the floor and lived on the couch. And and that was the start of it. That was the start of tennis. And you remember those days, Steve, when
for
guys
sure.
were just like, man, where are you living? So look, Tennis Tech. It's like, for me, it was like a junior getting a really good start, and it was invaluable. And as a young 19-year-old, 20-year-old, having that start in tennis was like gold. I mean, it was really unbelievable opportunity, to spend those couple of years, around Steve and that whole thing. But yeah,
Well, I appreciate you saying that. But one thing though is that, like for myself, Brandon a little bit earlier, but I would say both late starters, Brandon, that we didn't really learn through osmosis, but you certainly had quite a few different experiences before you went to Tennis Tech. You'd already been in tennis quite some time.
Yeah.
But it was not like you grew up at a club where you took tennis lessons
No,
to a group.
no, not at all, not at all. The North, that program that Terry Mabbott ran, it was almost, it was maybe once a week. You can get down there and hit tennis balls, and the rest of the time, you're just scrounging around in the wintertime trying to find a hit, trying to find anything to get on the tennis court. And then obviously in the summertime, you're playing from, 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock at night, and then, playing a little bit of, circuit tennis around Yorkshire and that sort of thing. So, yeah, didn't grow up in a club that way. It was really, go ahead.
I was going to say to our listeners, it was really the heyday of the tennis boom. The tiebreaker was put on TV, and then tennis could be in a time capsule. But when you came over to the United States, junior college tennis was a really high level of play, and it was people from all over the world. There used to be 32 men's teams, junior college men's teams in Florida, and at one point recently there was 0. Now we're back up to 2. But I always tell people, where would American tennis be if we didn't have the influx of all these foreign players coming in? But no, I clearly remember, Tennis Tech and the students. Not only were they from all over the United States, I have to look it up, but I think it was a point where we got over 40 states and 35 countries. It was like an immigration center. People were from everywhere.
Yeah. No, I remember. I think I remember you maybe had a little bit of a soft spot for some of the foreign lads, because we showed up with a duffel bag and no car, barely any money, and so I definitely remember you were. I could see that you had a soft spot for some of those kind of, the guys that were, maybe not from Texas or not had apartments and all that stuff. So. You were very good to us in that way.
Well, the one thing is none of you had a car. I mean, we had to. I remember we had 12 tennis courts. We had 8 courts on the bottom, 4 courts on the top at one point when we'd have lab, and I would send people to the top courts, and they would take their car. So I would lose my cool. Go, no, don't take your car 400 yards away.
Yeah.
Speaking of Steve losing his cool, Mark, was that ever a trend back in Tennis Tech days?
Oh, it was. I got a couple of times chewed out. A funny story. I was so at the end of every lab, we would have to. Steve would pull out a couple of students to do a new drill. Now you can imagine after 2 years of doing a drill every day, that these drills were getting pretty lame. But I thought they were lame anyway. So anyway, what would happen is Steve would pull out a few, maybe 4 of us to demo the drill. And so there's me at the back of the line, just talking to the guy next to me, who would do this drill? What is this? This is so silly. So I had a terrible attitude about it. Anyway, so we did the drill. At the end of the drill, Steve says, "Walpole, come on out here." So Walpole, just imitate the way I walk. So I kind of, Steve's got that distinctive walk, and so I imitate Steve's walk, and about 100 people start laughing, the way I'm imitating Steve's walk. And so Steve proceeds to spend the next 45 minutes just completely chewing me out. You're this, you're that, you're nothing, you're this. So listen, it was the greatest thing I've ever. It was great. I needed it. I was a little arrogant, a little cocky, and it was exactly what a cocky 19-year-old needed. It was great.
No, I've had as many as 150 people at one time mimic my walk. No, I think what happened so many times is we had students that had no background in sport, and it was fantastic that players that came in as complete beginners became great tennis teachers. But some would have really stage fright, and someone trying to be creative, and you have to just sit back with respect. Maybe no,
it was good. Yeah, I remember. You're right. You had all levels there. That was what made it so great, and I think that's what. Because it wouldn't have been the same program if you just had a bunch of cocky guys thinking that they're great at tennis. You had everything. I mean, you had good players. You had guys that had a little bit of tennis experience. You had guys that were changing careers. High school kids that were just coming out of high school. I mean, and you'd have a 45-year-old physics teacher that wanted to change his career. It was remarkable. It really was a remarkable program.
We had this side railing, if you remember, and many times people would have to sit. The fellow students would sit on the railing while someone had to come out and maybe give a 10-minute lesson. And we got to the point where people had to run a 3-hour practice. They had to run a lecture. We had a 15-hour lab per week. But I always tell people the story about Dion Krupe. You have to talk to Dion in one of these podcasts. He's like yourself, been coaching now for decades, and he just wouldn't shut up. He's some young kid was out there, fellow student, could have been old, because we had students that had retired from the military and had master's degrees and were making career changes. But he kept chirping away. And I remember I had to go to a meeting, so I'm wearing a coat and tie, and I'm pacing back and forth between the students sitting down watching lessons. So I felt like a hockey coach. So I did take a clipboard for our listeners, and I hit Dion Krupe over the head. Boom. Now you do that type of thing. We've got quite a few Canadians visiting here right now, and a coach can swear in Canada, but in the U.S., if you swear, you're going to lose your job.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about. So you're a tennis tech for 2 years. What other comes to your memory? You certainly met so many people there, like Vandermeer and Braden.
Yeah. All of that. I remember Chuck Creasy. He came to visit and did a talk. Obviously Vandermeer was probably the most entertaining. Fantastic with the group dynamics and just a magician when it comes to getting 80 people on 5 courts. Just commanded the group. Great speaker. Great when it comes to group dynamics and. The USPTR really, we did do both tests. We took the PTR and the USPTA test. Look, when you're studying tennis for 2 years and you went through what we went through, taking a USPTA test or taking a USPTR test is really sort of like let's go do this test, and it really was like Steve always says, it's a feather in your cap, but from what we've been doing the last 2 years, it really was just sort of an ABC type of test. And a lot of times Steve would actually have to teach us how to take the test. For example, a USPA test, the instructor would come out and he'd be demonstrating with a continental grip, and maybe he'd be hitting off his back foot and he'd be saying, well, what's the flaw? So okay, we'll just, all right, well, so you're hitting off your back foot. Now, we all wanted to get into your racket face is open, you're swinging across your body, your hitting zone is too short, but you can't really get into that stuff. So, that's how detailed, that's the kind of detail we were going into. So a test like that, I'm not saying there's a lot of value to that test, but it did seem almost, it is what it is.
Yeah, one of Brandon's staff members just took the USPTA test.
Has it changed?
Maybe Brandon could comment on that. Does the test change that much?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience. I felt the same way as you, Mark. The training that I had with Steve did make the test feel like an ABC type thing, and unfortunately to most of the industry of coaches who are taking that is a monumental occasion. And for me, I felt similar to you.
Yeah.
We talked about the USPTA PTR on these podcasts. I think if you're in the United States, you're getting started in tennis, it's actually good to be a member of both and be associated. And so you want to be critical. I think you have to have been on the inside. I remember Vandermeer was so great. You already touched upon it, as the group dynamics, the corrective measures, also just the organizational approach to the PTR back then. And I was a tester. I'm not connected. I'm still a member of both organizations. But no, with the USPTA, with both organizations, we broke the record for testing so many people at one time. But we'd had as many as 15. And I'd have 2 or 3 student assistants, staff members, and we'd go in at the end and say, okay, tell us how we have to get better. And I would just tell these guys, just keep nodding, no, don't smirk. And because, in many, many ways, that's where people don't know unless they know. If you're an insider to what we put together, I always tell people maybe we have 4 or 5% original thought, but what we're doing is a study of all these other people. And I think you just said it so well. As the student needed to find that someone was leaning back, and right, they were doing 9 other things wrong, and they weren't even dealing with the primary flaw. But one thing, your days at Tennis Tech, you met students who had already started in Southern Cal. That helped you with your journey in tennis to go from Texas to California. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, that was a big one. That the continuity from right from Tennis Tech. We had 2 years of studying, and we were hungry. I was ready to go. So I was very lucky. A student that was there a couple of years before, maybe 3 years before, Sam Olston. I think he was probably one of your first students, maybe your first, second year there. He was in. He took a job in Newport Beach at the Balboa Bay Club as the director of junior tennis, and he hired me, and the rest is history. So that was a big one, because I think if I'd have gone from Texas, from Tennis Tech, to possibly to a different type of environment, or maybe to a non-Tennis Tech person, it might have not worked out as well.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because so many people that, it's nice when your experience matches your education. So you spent, so many years at Tennis Tech, or so many days, weeks, months, and some of your fellow classmates would have gone elsewhere, and the director of tennis, the teaching didn't match. It wasn't even close.
Yeah.
So it was great. It's like, say, with Braden, if you really know Braden information, I feel like you learn more being away from Braden. So I say somebody does an intense internship under Vic, and then you're out there, you're teaching, and the more you teach, this makes more and more sense. Mm-hmm. But I do think you have to, you need to have that lecture lab experience, or your education and your experience. But I say it this way, is that so many of my students, their experience didn't match their education. You go someplace and the coaches, to this day, it happens all the time, don't slow them down. It's got to be fun. Basically they're saying, don't teach them anything. Happy, busy, good.
Yeah. So look, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead,
so my first full-time teaching experience in tennis, I was lucky as well to work for a director of tennis who was a Tennis Tech student, Mike Darcy. So a similar situation where I'm not sure it would have turned out the same way if I was working for someone who didn't support a lot of what I wanted to do with the junior program.
Yeah. So what happened was, I got down to Newport Beach in 1990. Sam had been there probably maybe 6 months and had started the program. And so Newport Beach at that time, we had a facility with a lot of courts. The Balboa Bay Club, that was 18 courts, and we had access to quite a few of them in the afternoon. But that particular Newport Beach, you probably had maybe 4 or 5 clubs within 1 mile radius. You had the John Wayne Club, you had the Newport Beach Tennis Club, you had the Marriott's that had a program. You had like one up there in Costa Mesa. So literally, you're talking, probably 7 or 8 programs within a couple of mile radius of where we were starting this program. Now, and a lot of those clubs, they'd have former Grand Slam champions there. The Phil Dents of the world and the Ross Cases and ex tour level guys running those facilities. So we came into town, and first thing we did was we bought a bunch of ball basket, shopping carts, and started pumping out balls and started actually teaching tennis. And pretty much every pro in town would have a little ball hopper, and it would be kind of that standard USPTA tennis lesson. And so we just, we really, I have to say, we were movers and shakers, and we really got things going. And, within a year, we had, over 120 kids in the program. And then we, from there, we were able to start another facility. We got another place in Fullerton, and then it just really, really took off. And, again, like Steve said, if you never had that breeding, that 2 years that really set you up, because you just went into the world like a hungry dog, and you just wanted to get at it. And we were ambitious, and we were excited about tennis. And so I think we brought a lot of that to that particular area. And we can talk about some of the players that came through that program and some of the success. But we were going hard at tennis. Yeah.
With Southern Cal, before I went to Tyler, Texas to revise the curriculum, I was in Southern Cal working at Vic's, as you know. And for the longest time, I worked as a volunteer, and they even when they offered me a job, I got to the point because I was working nights, the role of starving artist. I was working nights, and I was just Vic's go for this, go for that. And finally, his head coach, Mary Lay, said, "Steve, you have to start working." But when Vic would leave town, what I would do is just travel all over Southern Cal and watch people teach tennis. I tease at the John Wayne Tennis Club. I tell people I was VJ Armitrage's neighbor, because when I was out there, I lived in a van, and I would park next to Armitrage's Mercedes. So he would leave his Mercedes when he would take off to the airport, but that was an amazing place. They had a rating system 1 through 10. And this is starting late 1979, 1980. They had a video. Every court was filmed. And the service they provided was they found a game for everyone.
Yeah.
Which is one of the most difficult jobs in tennis, because people, they get in their cliques and everybody wants to play a better player and win. But you certainly, when you started with Sam and others out there, you were up against some named pros. What comments would you have on that? So you guys obviously played tennis, but you didn't have the world-class background.
No, not even close. Look, your teaching had to stand out. We had to start with complete beginners. We started with complete beginners, and our teaching had to be second to none, because the competition was so great. And anybody that was sort of already a decent player, would be going off to those other programs. So we had to start from, and it was better. It was better that way, because we got a good reputation, and then suddenly players that were maybe intermediate players would start showing up, and then some more advanced players. So then they would have a little bit more recognition of having a few more ranked players around, But yeah, we took them on head on. We really did. Again, that's that tennis tech background. It gave us massive confidence. We did have a lot of confidence. There's no doubt about it. We saw the teaching. We saw that what was happening. We saw the type of lessons, and to be honest, not much was happening. So we really did stir it up a little bit, and I think it. You start seeing more academies open up, or they would call them academies. So it did become a little bit of a lot of competition, and competition's good, I guess. So yeah, we. I don't know, Steve. We took him on head first.
Let me ask you this. I know Brandon has all sorts of film of, his partner Allington, and they have a camp, and they're doing a demo, and they're filming everyone, and the kids are definitely, it's impressive. The young kids can hit the ball. Did you have a lot of that in Southern Cal? I think that here in South Florida, those two places, I would guess, is number 1 and 2 in the United States for people poaching your players. You work very hard getting the kid to improve, and next thing you know, they're going to go to the name pro, or they're going to go where there's the backroom deal, and so there's a lack of loyalty. Would you say that in Southern Cal?
Yeah, massive lack of loyalty. Probably over the last 30 odd years, I've maybe had a handful of players that have stayed with me from start to end. I hate to say that, but that's sort of the nature of the business. Your lifespan of working with a player. If I, the amount of times I've started a player from day one, and 2 years later, the parents telling me what I need to be working on. Okay, that's a typical scenario, and then suddenly, the kids or the parents getting their head turned from a coach at a tournament that's offering them all kinds of deals, all kinds of my big pet peeve in junior tennis is people. They ask me, if I run groups or when I used to run large academies, who's coming out? So that would be my biggest pet peeve. What do you mean who's coming out? Obviously I knew what they were meaning. Like whose shoulders my kid's going to rub today? Who's my kid hitting with? And it would just drive me nuts. Day in and day out, having to deal with that sort of mentality. Everyone's shopping around. Everyone's looking for that magic wand. I tell parents, I try to explain the formula of how to get good at tennis, and their response is, "Well, Mark, it can't be that simple." Yeah, it really is that simple, but you've got to be due diligent. You've got to stick with it. You got to put the hours in and day out. There's coaches around that are claiming to be a footwork expert or a strategy expert. Look, if a coach says I'm a strategy expert, run. He's not a strategy expert. If he's claiming to be a footwork expert, just run. He doesn't know anything about tennis if that's what he's claiming to be an expert at. So, you deal with this, 30 years ago. I'm dealing with it now. It's probably a little bit worse now, because of all the YouTube and all the bad information that's out there. So, you're probably fighting it on a bigger scale. With obviously, back in those days, remember when a kid played a tournament, he would get a mail card in the mail to tell him what his first time was. Now the kid knows who he's playing from the first to the last round. So, and he knows every kid in the draw. He knows every kid's UTR in the draw. So things have definitely changed that way. The business, the academy business is about retaining and recruiting, or recruiting and retaining. And unfortunately, a kid goes into a program and it'll get a little bit of attention for the first couple of weeks, and then he's pushed on, and then it's the next kid that comes in that gets the attention for 2 weeks, and let the kid drop the $20,000, and then let's move on to the next one. So it's not good. It's not good.
What do you got, Brandon?
No, we've kind of had a very similar. Might be a couple years older than me, but we've got a very similar, I would say, career experience. Very similar story here in South Florida when it comes to the transient nature of junior players. The question of who's in the group always was one of my favorites as well. All types of stories, but again, just on the same page as you is in terms of just trying to help kids hit the ball better and getting them quality reps, and not being so concerned with who they're on the same court with. There were some creative things that we were able to do to help ease parents' concerns about who they're hitting with, but at the same time still be true to our principles of younger kids hitting with the older kids, or mentoring, the older kids mentor the younger kids, however you want to look at it. But it's.
I mean, yeah, I've even done. I remember doing one experiment. I had a young junior that the mother's constantly banging on me about playing this and playing that, and so I set him up with an old student of mine that was an ex-professional player, and I said, "Hey, come out and play this kid. Do me a favor." So I kind of had the kid playing, and it lasted about probably 18 minutes, the whole match. And the kid, the pro just hit winner after winner, and the kid couldn't even get into a rally. So I tried to explain to the parent, look, your kid's getting worse at tennis, and this is why. There's no rallying, your kid's playing a really high-level player, and your kid is actually getting worse at tennis. And I explained the whole thing. At the end of the session, the parent was like, oh, that was great. Can we set up that again? So I get to the point sometimes where it doesn't matter what you say.
Right.
They're going to have their own ideas. They're going to have their own thoughts about tennis, and it becomes a huge battle. I lost my train of thought there, but yeah, just that whole academy and that whole running kids every day. It wears you down. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an exercise. You get players a little further down the road, and they're playing a younger player. It's good to take three players. Player maybe you've been working with for 5 years, and he's a good student. He's in the 16s, and he's going to play a couple kids that are just aging up into the 14s. And you tell the players who's further down the road, say, okay, you're going to play this way. And then one player is going to be on the bench, and they're just going to chart how many times the ball's hit. And you just go say, let's just play one set. And, we play ad or no ad, doesn't matter. Play one set. And you tell the older kid, what I want you to do is serve and volley and end each point in 3 shots. They're not trying to hit one ace. They're not trying to hit anything big. It's just tic-tac-toe, combination, the 3 parts of the court, the back court, the mid court, the forecourt. And then on the flip side, they should only have to play 2 shots when they're returning serve. Because if they're really taught well, I got another question to ask you down the road here is about the grips and such, is that if they're hanging on the racket properly, they can just take the second serve or even the first serve of a lesser player and just play an approach shot, glide into the net, they just tap the volley cross court and not hit one ball where they would even break a pane of glass. And now it's really clones taught by clowns. Kids are hanging on to Western grips. I want to come back to Newport Beach, but I'll jump ahead on grips. Natalia Sorkin, she knows that we're interviewing you, and I said, tell me a few things to ask Mark. And she said, ask him the same question you asked Richard Hernandez. And Richard, I'm not sure if you were at Tennis Tech when he was there, but I remember everybody. I don't remember who was with who.
Yeah.
But so we did a discussion on Tennis Canada and said, what's the number one thing to improve tennis in Canada? And he said, grips. Why don't you expand upon grips a little bit?
Yeah, well, when I first got to California, obviously everything's played on a hard court. And back in those days, you'd have a lot more, one-on-one coaches, the likes of the Lansdorfs of the world and this type of teaching, less academy stuff. And when I would go to a tournament, back in the 90s, and people like Venus were playing and that whole age group, and you'd look along the courts and maybe you'd have 1 or 2 kids that would have a grip that's way under, or an arm angle that's moving 5 different ways. And the rest would be okay. Yes, it wouldn't be great, but there would be a lot more right than wrong. And now I go to a tournament, I might get 1 or 2 kids that there's more right than wrong. Pretty much 7 or 8 out of 10 have arm angles that they're going to fall off and grips that are completely under. You'll get 2 or 3 out of 10 that are hitting the forehand and the backhand on the same side of the racket. And so, they talk modern tennis. They talk things like, the modern forehand. It has gone backwards. There is no question. From the 90s and the early 2000s, tennis in Southern California has definitely gone backwards as far as the level. And that could be various reasons. That's not just strokes. That's other reasons. But grips is a problem. When I teach a grip that I think is within the range of correctness. not too far extreme. If the grip slips a little bit, I'm okay with that. But if you can get a grip right at the beginning, that's it. That's the foundation. That's the house will hold up. So yeah, I agree with Hernandez. Grips,
Yeah,
grips is grip.
actually, Natalia's daughter, young Tasia, I mean, she's a small kid and every ball is way up high, but she's still in the ballpark where she's playing with an Eastern forehand grip. And then people have options.
Yeah.
If you're certainly you can turn your hand underneath, but in the ready position, we were just watching Coco Gauff, and as great as she is, and I have so much respect for her, it's kind of like, can you imagine if it was really well taught in the beginning?
Yeah.
That just lets you know that the superior athlete, and there's a lot more than tennis and beautiful strokes.
But if all things were equal, yeah, exactly. If everybody's equal, obviously the kid with a better looking game and the strokes is going to push through. But rarely things are equal.
Right. Yeah. No. Dave Secker asked me to ask you as well. With the thoughts of Southern California, definitely has gone down. I know there's a number of reasons. You touched upon that. Like say when tennis became a global sport, and the Berlin Wall came down and the fall of communism. At one point, tennis was not held in high regard in Eastern Europe because it wasn't an Olympic sport. But at one point in the 70s, it was really easy to remember, in the men's draw, there would be 70 Americans. And most of them had a connection to Southern Cal. And also, too, is that a lot of the tennis courts were cement-based. They weren't all asphalt-based. Everything was just lightning fast, and the wooden rackets. 1,001 reasons, but Dave Secker said, what about all the academies popping up? Is that one of the things that's killing tennis in Southern Cal versus club tennis, where you're taking private lessons, you're being taught how to play, and it's not a factory, and it's not just because many times again, it's just a factory. You get in line and they're just pumping out balls.
Yeah.
No teaching. Yeah,
no, nothing. Just to backtrack on California, SoCal tennis, 20 years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, the Southern California sectionals, which back in the day was the tournament. You had over 2,000 kids in that draw, all age groups. Now, I know they've downgraded it. It's a level 3 tournament. I think the last count was about 600 or 700. Now, why is that important? Well, in Southern California, it really is a hotbed. There's pockets everywhere of players, and obviously we have the numbers of kids that are playing tennis. But what happened was, just for the tournament, backtracking with tournaments, again, it's a moneymaker. They've ruined it because of money. Back in the day, the kids would have to play X amount of designated tournaments, and then at the end of the year, June, the kids would play Southern California sectionals, and it was the be all and end all. You would have kids coming from UCLA that were still 18 coming to try to win SoCal sectionals. It was, if you look at the former champions, the Davenports, the Changs, the Samprases, and on and on and on. If you look back, and they would say their best junior tennis was played then. I would say winning SoCal sectionals was better than winning clay court nationals. Not obviously as big as a Kalamazoo, but second to Kalamazoo. Now it's a fringe tournament, and I'm looking at draws. I'm looking at tournaments, $120 to sign up for a tournament. Playing 10-point tiebreakers. Some tournaments are even 4 games. We're paying hundreds of dollars for less and less tennis. It's frightening, and it all goes hand in hand. The academy business. It's not a sport anymore. It's an industry, and we've got to get back to making it a sport. I would love actually Southern California to almost go rogue, go out on their own, have some tournaments let's get some of these prices back down. Let's get the kids all playing each other. Let's forget all the national stuff. Let's just become our own entity. It'd be a really interesting experiment if this place, because we do have the weather, we do have the the courts and the population of players. If we just, almost the USTA should say, let's experiment with Southern California, make it its own entity, and I guarantee it, if we went back to the basics of proper teaching, proper tournaments, reasonable prices, it would start to happen. And like Steve said, probably the next big player is going to come out of this region or like Florida. But boy, we're blowing it here. We really are. Sorry to go. Steve. Sorry to go on a rant there.
No, that's good. I've done that. Go ahead, Brandon.
It's really interesting you say that about the local tournaments becoming less important, because our last guest on the podcast, Chuck Creasy, said the same exact thing about a tournament in South Carolina, and it's got to be a factor in what's happening with American tennis, and how there's less of an emphasis on being, winning these honorable events that have been going on for decades and decades.
Yeah. Look, it was fine for Sampras and Chang.
Right.
If Michael Chang was, dominating junior tennis, well, he just played men's open tennis. And he actually won the men's sectionals, I think, at 15. And obviously we know he won the French at 17. I do know a lot of the local pros, the Davenports and the Debbie Grains of the world, and they do tell me stories about when they were kids and stuff. And boy, we're complicating this. We're making it way more complicated than we need to. Let's just play. Let's just get some good players together. There's plenty of sites. And let's just play. I mean, the amount of talk about what shall I play? What are you playing? Who are you playing? It's just like, can we just play some tennis?
With Davenport, I read where Jagger Leach, am I saying his name right?
Jagger, yeah.
That anyway, your name was mentioned for coaching him along with your partner Nash.
Yeah.
Torman, right? How do you pronounce Nash's last name?
Nenad Torman. That's right.
Torman. So it goes by Nash. With we can talk about Lindsay Davenport, but let's go back, stay right on topic you're on with backyard tennis. Winston Churchill, democracy is not perfect. Level 2s and level 3s that really should have never been put in place. With Southern California, South Florida, I should say, because it's as a state, it's its own section. And then Texas, those are the big 1, 2, 3 that I said for years, there's 17 sections. Let's get competitive and each section do the very best working together. And granted, in Southern Cal, large population base, a lot of sunshine. Here in Florida, we have, years ago, we didn't have the population base. We do now. We have more foreign players because it's closer to South America, closer to Europe. It's cheaper to buy real estate here. Actually, it's going up though. But with that, I think backyard tennis. And then when the UTR was put into place, and Dave Fish walked away from the UTR. UTR's got a lot of positives, but it's the wild, wild west where it's too expensive to play and there's too many UTRs. There's not structure. Like a teaching pro, a coach, to me, I think they should be out there coaching kids. And it's like, well, I can make more money sitting in the air conditioning running a tournament. There's too many tournaments. Then we don't have seniors playing juniors. But no, it's now you don't have to play your section. Before you had to play, and it was based on the number of USTA members. So say if you were from Hawaii or you were from the New England area or you're from the Intermountain, not as many kids got to go to. It was really just hard courts and clay courts. And, in the indoor, not everybody went to the indoor because it was Thanksgiving time, but it was more just play tennis right in your backyard. I think Wayne Bryan used to touch upon that, is that if you walk around your neighborhood and there's someone beating you, you don't need to get on an airplane. If you get on a bicycle, you go around a couple of neighborhoods.
That's right.
You need to get on an airplane. And just go on. And it's just too much where it's kind of the Taekwondo is take your dough. There used to be a black belt and a brown belt. Now it's like a rainbow. There's, I guess, 3 different color blues with different belts. But I want to go back to Southern Cal, but also and we go back to Davenport and others from that area. But for a couple of years, you were in Sacramento. And I know
Yeah.
one of your students, Joe Gilbert. Tell us about your experience in Sacramento. Tell us about Joe Gilbert. Tell us about Jensen Brooksby.
Joey Gilbert. So Joey was he was one of the handful of players that were with me from start to end. We started him in SoCal, and he was the same age group as the Bryan brothers and Kevin Kim and that whole age group that we were heavily involved in, and was a very good player. Won sectionals a couple of times. Actually, he won sectionals because the Bryan brothers and Kevin were playing junior Wimbledon. So that was actually a pretty good section that year. But Joey was a very good player. Played 10. So anyway, he followed me to Sacramento. I took a job as the head pro at Arden Hills Country Club, which was a famous swim club. It was where Mark Spitz, you remember Mark Spitz back in the day? It's where he grew up as a swimmer, and a couple of brothers built this fantastic facility, and it was really sort of cutting edge, a beautiful gym, beautiful swim, and almost like what you see Lifetime facilities now. They were doing that before Lifetime were doing it. Anyway, so I took the job, and Joe Gilbert came with me. He was 16 years old, and he came with me and lived with me, and we still trained up there while I took that role. And that role was head pro, so it was a lot of hats, dealing with memberships, dealing with ladies tennis, junior tennis, having a staff. And it was a very good experience. Didn't realize how much it rained in Northern California, though. That was a bit of a, because there was no indoor courts. So I did lose a lot of, I was surprised how many days we lost from rain. But anyway, fast forwarding, Joe played tennis got a full scholarship to play for Fresno. And then he transferred to Boise, where Patton was the coach there. And had a nice college career, and then he enjoyed Sacramento, so he went back to Sacramento after college and started teaching juniors and training, and then a full circle for Joe, ended up at Arden Hills and runs the program there, and that's where Brooksby came from. So
it's an interesting story with Brooksby. Certainly he's not the cleanest ball striker, but what a warrior, and what a relationship that they've been together for so long. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I saw Joe several years ago. I think Brooksby was maybe 11. Saw him at one of those regional training centers for the USTA, which we can talk about that. But I saw Brooksby and Joe, and Brooksby was 11, and he was kind of beating up on the 14-year-olds, just figuring out how to win from 20 feet behind the baseline and throwing up high balls and drop shots and attacking short, attacking returns. And it was, but I didn't see that. And then about 2 years ago, before Brooksby made his run, I did take a visit up to see Joe. I took Nenad's son, Liam, to practice with a few of Joe's players, and Joe was very gracious and put us up for a few days, and so I did spend a few days catching up with Joe, and he was telling me about Brooksby, and he also had another player that won Kalamazoo. So he had two players that won Kalamazoo and a girl that won the girl national 18s, Katie Arnett or something like that.
The other player played at Virginia.
Colin. Was it Colin? I can't remember. Colin, maybe.
With an A, like Alta.
Yes, Alta Marino. That's it. Yeah. So anyway, so he was still training, and I tell you, I didn't see that coming. I'll be honest, because I was watching Brooksby practice, and he was hitting balls, and the ball was barely moving, and I'm thinking, the serve motion was a little bit off, but he did have something about him as far as any game that he played, any drill that he did, he won every one. He found a way to win every one. And it wasn't the prettiest tennis, but he's a very, very competitive young man. So yeah, I was really happy for Joe, and we had a few words after he had that run at the Open, and congratulated him. And it really is, and I do think, like I said earlier, Joe was one of the kids that stuck with me forever. So I do think he's got a little bit of that in him, that loyalty, that that sort of. His father was from Louisiana, and a very, very loyal guy, very, very sweet guy. Unfortunately, he died when Joe was maybe 15 or 16, and so I kind of took Joe in, and so Joe's got tremendous loyalty, good person, honest, and I think that relationship, Joe's able to give it out to him. He chewed him out several times, quite viciously during the practice. So it's that kind of relationship, and and a lot of people tell me, maybe this Brooksby should get a new coach. Maybe he should go do this, go do that. And I'm like, no way. It wouldn't be the same thing. Look, there's no doubt about it. The serve motion's a little off, and that's a hard thing to fix at this age. And that's particularly where the arm angle does move. That is quite a tricky fix. Anyway, but yeah,
no, the chemistry.
Tremendous guy.
There's the relation. I think you used the key word, relationship. Maybe there could be an outside influence to tweak his game.
Yeah.
But, we're a massive country, so you just think Joe Gilbert to be producing national champions, he's got to be doing something right, and that's where.
Yeah.
I would think on the coaching side to make that guy such a gamer. I'm sure you got to think. First of all, you got to congratulate Brooksby and you got to his parents, certainly. We can all be armchair quarterbacks and sit back and go, yeah, Brooksby could be a little bit better. But I remember writing something about him, and that's the kind of guy you want to pick to go to war.
That's right. That's right.
Pretty strokes.
If he can stay, if he can stay injury free, he's a nightmare to play in tennis. I did watch him play a couple of UTR events before he went on that run last year when he won the grass. So I think he got to the final of the one down in Delray Beach, and he was just playing some regular UTR events here in Newport Beach, and it was starting to happen a little bit. He was that return up the line, and look, to me, he just makes the player hit every shot they don't want to hit. And that's where he's a nightmare to play. He makes you hit every. Too. He's like 6'4", right? Yeah. He just makes the guys hit every shot they don't want to hit.
Yeah, he's a gamer. When he went in against Djokovic, it was a very interesting first set. But he went in with such an unbelievable, just that belief system.
Yeah,
I could beat this guy.
Yeah, you got to give it to him. You got to give it to him.
Let's circle back to Newport Beach. I heard Jim Lair at one time say about Robert Lansdorp. At one point, Robert was called by Dr. So-and-so, and a group of physicians had bought some land. And they just it was a cold call, and they said, we'd like to have you be a partner in this program project. They didn't say land deal. And Robert, who can talk like Rocky Balboa, and so he eventually sat down with them, and they gave him 25% of the land deal. Jim Lair used to say that that's one of the reasons that Robert could stick by his guns and have his principles. Tell us a little about it. You got involved with real estate.
Well, let me just tell you one. I'll give you one quick Lansdorf story.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did see Lansdorf give a few lessons once, and he is quite a character. Most kids can't handle that sort of stress, and I think sometimes you think his goal is he wants to make the kid cry, but he was giving a kid a lesson, and the kid, he was working on the kid's volley. He said, "Come on, let me take a look at your volleys." It might have been the first lesson or second lesson, but the kid comes in, and Robert gives him a few tips on the volley, and the kid just completely dismisses it and just starts shopping his volley and just not doing anything, just hitting exactly how the kid wants to hit it. So Robert he stops the lesson and says, "Okay, kid, you're done for the day." And so the kid was out of there, and it was half the lesson. It was only half the lesson. So I said, "Well, what was that all about? What's that for?" He goes, "Listen, Can you imagine that car ride home? So he's like, I got it. I totally got it. So that's, we need more of that,
Yeah. No, he did that
we
with
can, yeah,
Jean Austen, one of her sons. I mean, 5 kids, and he actually gave a lesson. He didn't say one word. And Jean
yeah,
Austen, who ran the pro shop at the Kramer Club, and our listeners should know from previous podcasts that it was a great setup where Braden was there first, teaching these kids a solid base, a great base, if you would. And then Lansdorp came in. But he said to Gene Austen, that was the lesson. He didn't listen to me last lesson, so I didn't talk to him in this lesson.
exactly.
No, I know that you say it quite well. Is he trying to make the kids cry here? But better to have the kids cry Monday through Friday than go to the weekend and not be a competent player and cry at the tournament.
Yeah.
But because you got in real estate, some people might say, well, did that help you with your principles? Because I think, unfortunately, I know many people I've trained to teach tennis, it's almost like they had to sell out on their principles to teach tennis because they got to go to the grocery store. And, so it's like, well, Vic Braden used to say, here's my, back in the day, $20, maybe now 40, 50, 60, 80, 100. Here's my money for a private lesson. Don't talk to me about strokes. I'm going to give you money. And, with, Brandon and his partner Allington, like say, for example, someone's, they're playing twice a week. They're on a ladies team. You've got all these different avenues in tennis. It's not just goal-oriented juniors. But why don't you comment on that? Your real estate background, and then that allows you where
it does. There's no question about it.
You can do it your way.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I kind of fell into that world. I'll just give you the general picture of how I was able to do it. So when I bought the tennis college from Vic, I needed places for coaches to live, and this is quite often how people do make money in real estate. It's a little bit by fluke or by luck or however the market is at the particular time. So I was buying apartments for coaches to live, and then obviously the market would go up in value. I was able to refinance, take money out, and buy some more apartments. And Sam, we were actually going to buy the tennis school together, and he was sort of doing really well at that point. He was buying and selling some homes, and we had a real heart-to-heart, and he decided, Mark, I'm going to move on from tennis. And he was a fantastic tennis coach. And decided to move on, and he was a little discouraged with the tennis world. He'd had a lot of kids that had sort of shopping around, and he was a little bit disgusted with the tennis business, and real estate was going pretty good, and he completely left the tennis business and started flipping houses. Just to give you kind of the volume of how many houses he's probably flipped and bought and sold, over 2,500 houses in the last 20 odd years. At one point, Sam and some of the partners he had were buying a house every day in Orange County or LA County. So massive volume and very, very successful. So, I jumped on I kind of, jumped on the wagon there a little bit, and was able to invest with Sam and invest some of the money that I'd earned in tennis and earned in some of the real estate that I did myself. So that allowed me some seed money and not have to, like you say, bow down to the tennis world.
No, I know Sam. At one point, I was married at the time. Craig Tiley was, I would say, my right-hand man at that time, and we had an offer to go out and join forces with Sam. So you were probably one of the coaches at that time. I think he had as many as 12 people that I had trained at one point.
Yeah, could be.
And things happen. I was gentleman's agreement. I remember it was the day my son Connor was born, December 19th, 1990. So Sam and he had a partner at that time. They called up and they said, okay, the deal's off. So then I later went back out because one of the clubs that was on the docket, the guy said, well, if you're not in, I'm not in. So he flew me back out, and I decided not to go to Southern California. But what happened when I first talked to Sam is we were going to bring Vic Braden into the mix and because I always, thought that Vic should have always been with junior tennis. He left junior tennis. He left junior tennis when he went to run the Vic Braden Tennis College because he basically wanted to generate more dollars for research. So when he left the Kramer Club, he never really, he did work, as you know, and you saw him do things like that where he would work with a pro. That was something that came out in the movie King Richard, is that Vic was, did you see that movie, Mark?
I did. I recently saw it, and I go ahead, finish your thought there, and I got a few comments on that.
Yeah, that Vic wasn't portrayed. It was just unfortunate. I really liked the movie, but the economy was way down. People would always say Vic was not a businessman. Those apartments that you purchased, they didn't have kitchens, correct?
Yeah, those were the lodges. Those were the lodges. They were for guests, though. They were for people would stay 2 or 3 nights. But I was able to buy some other apartments there that had kitchens and that sort of thing for the coaches. Just backtracking on that Venus movie, Williams movie. So that when Venus was 10. I saw her in the semi-final and the final of that last tournament she played. It was the Southern California sectionals. She played one of my students in the semi-final, and she played one of Vic's students, a girl called Christina Triska, in the final. And so I showed up to this thing, and I was in the semis and then the final. And, Venus, she pretty much hit the ball the same as she did. There was some good work done, and she hit the ball incredibly. But it was really just how she could get around the court and how live her arm was. She would hit a return, and these girls were very good little players. A girl like Triska, she would miss once every Tuesday. She was that consistent. But Venus would hammer a return up the line, and I can't tell you how many times Venus hit an overhead over the back fence, bounce overhead. She must have hit 10 bounce overheads over the back fence. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, what is this? It was remarkable. The poor kid couldn't even get into a rally. Now, like you said, that's not what happened with the Vic. Vic would never have, he was so polite and so well-mannered and so positive that in fact, I remember what he said. He was, these girls have got a huge future. They're going to be great. That's what he said. And then, as far as Williams, I remember seeing Richard Williams at in Miami when the girls were maybe 13. So obviously they're at Macy's at that time, and Richard's there watching the Easter Bowl. And I don't know why he's there, but he's giving interviews and he's just giving it all like, yeah, my kids only play a couple of hours a day. Yeah, my kids don't take it that serious. Just a kidder, So he was anyway. But yeah, that was and Serena, who was maybe 8 at the time, was when Venus was playing the final. She was just doing handstands and backflips and. She was just incredible little athletes. But
it was more like they went. There was only 2 hours a day that they didn't play. They worked.
That's right. Right.
They worked so hard. But there was a recession. Vic made some moves with the tennis college. Tell us a little bit how it became Braden Bollettieri, and then you took that over. Yeah.
That was. I think they tried to team up and. It was really a bad matchup, obviously Nick's your showman and, he's got his bleached teeth and his suntan and comes in the town and Vic's just your consummate gentleman, the difference with Vic is, like he would go do a conference and maybe he was, had an hour or an hour and a half speaking. He would be there 4 hours and then he'd be another 2 hours answering questions. And he would give his time away for free. It was incredible. So
Well, there's a funny,
they were.
to interrupt, there's a funny story where he has a meeting with Bollettieri, and Vic used to say, "Yeah, we're going to talk about forehands and backhands," and he told me I needed to get my teeth whitened.
That's right. Yeah, Vic did tell me that. It's just, so it was chalk and cheese, and yes, there's a lot to learn from Bollettieri. You got to take your hat off to him. It's incredible. He built a system, or he built a farm, and he had kids living with him, and he was all in, and he deserves all the success he got because he was he's in there day in and day out.
Well, we say that he got in the Hall of Fame, rightfully so, but he created environment. Braden got in the Hall of Fame based on education. Yeah,
I did a quick story before Vic. Obviously when Vic died, and I was at an event at the Carson Center, and Pam Shriver was there. And I walked back to the car, to the parking lot with Pam, and she did ask me, "So what do you think?" She said, Vic. You knew Vic, right? And I said, "Yeah, Vic." And she goes, "Well, what do you think about him getting into the Hall of Fame?" And I just, and maybe this, I'm not saying she was on the committee. I said, "Well, it's a no-brainer. It's an insult that he wasn't already on the Hall of Fame. He is the coach of the coaches." And
what'd she say?
So hopefully she said, "Well, I'll take that back." And he did get in. I think they were already obviously thinking about putting him in, but hopefully that little bit pushed it over the edge a little bit.
Pam Shriver, I been around just like everybody has been around Pam Shriver. She was taught by Don Candy, an Australian, and with I was at the Newport Beach Tennis Club. Andy and I went out. We spent some time talking to Melody, Vic's widow, and we just said, "Let's go into the Kramer Club." Just our way of grieving with Braden's death, and so anyway, Pam Shriver's there, and Andy, he's just great personality. He goes, "Hey, do you know Pam?" I said, "No." He goes, "But I've met her before in this situation, but I don't know her at all." He goes, "Well, let's go talk to her." I said, "No, Andy, let's go watch your kid hit balls." And, it's not to, just like say anybody, I mean, let's go watch their kid hit balls. And then that could be a conversation. That's the conversation. And it's not directly towards her son's forehand, backhand serve. It's, let's just deal with the facts. When people start saying, "Well, what about Vic Braden?" And it's more like, let's just look at your son's forehand. Let's look at his backhand. What would Vic say about that? And that's what's missed. So I've always said the book should be written. Vic is missed, and Vic was missed. And unfortunately, for the longest time, people in all walks of tennis thought that Vic was a little short, fat, funny guy, because he was so funny. He was like a professional comedian. I can remember him being on Hollywood Squares. He was on like the Mike Douglas, Johnny Carson show, and people remember the presentation, not the information. We've touched upon that, but
that's right.
But so now with you're basically with real estate holdings, you don't do that as much anymore, but you teach tennis. So you've always taught tennis.
Yeah, I had the tennis school, the tennis college for about 7 years, from 97 to maybe 2004. And then when I sold the tennis college, like I said, I had some seed money and had some apartments and various other buildings that I was able to pull money out of and invest with Sam. And that's sort of how I've done it for the last several years. And so it does afford me that I can teach tennis in my terms. And so I choose not to run a tennis academy. I choose to do tennis one-on-one, and I do it with my partner Nenad Torman, and we're kind of a dying breed, of guys that are out there developing strokes. And the other day I'm teaching a tennis lesson. Maybe I mentioned this to you, Steve, where I'm working with a junior, and the junior's getting pretty good in tennis, and the kid just lost to the Leach at the Winter Nationals in the boys 14s in the final. So he's a top 10 junior, and I'm working on fundamentals. And the mother said to me, "Hey, Mark, when are you ever going to move on from this?" Well, let me explain. There is no moving on from this. and she asked me, well, can you help him with his strategy a little bit, or can you help him with his mental side? I said, well, if you think about it, that's all I'm really doing is working on strategy, because I'm giving him the ability not to miss a tennis ball, or I'm giving him the ability to make the other kid miss a tennis ball. So indirectly, I'm working on strategy. Indirectly, I'm working on footwork, even if I'm not addressing it, because as a coach, I know I don't need to address that. It's not necessary for me to talk about movement with a player like this. Now, yes, I got to work him hard. I got to push him. But every session I do with him, we try to make the racket move a little bit better, and we work him hard. But it seems like I'm doing the same thing day in and day out, and that's what people don't really understand. That's the art of the tennis teaching. There's so much nonsense out there on the internet, and the 5 cues of a forehand, or the 5 new ways to hit a forehand. Anyway. So
the 5 different types of topspin.
Yes. So that's that. Yeah, exactly. So that's how I spend my days. Hopefully, sometimes it is a little bit mind numbing, when you're dealing with parents. And at the moment, Nenad's away at a tournament with Liam. And as you know, your mind can wander a little bit when you're on the court on your own. So that's how I spend most of my days.
Actually, Welby Van Horn would be asked, "Can I ask you about strategy?" And he would just say, "No."
That's right. Let me just finish with this. Is what's interesting is Nenad was a very good tennis player. He was number 1 in South Africa, and got to 200-300 level tennis player in the world, and only played professional tennis for about a year, 2 years, and got to a very high level. Signed with NCAA. Is very, very good tennis player, and so probably one of the better players in Orange County as far as former players. And he's one of those unique guys that is a very, very good tennis player and a very, very good tennis coach. And people ask me, how come he never talks about strategy? He's the best player in town. So that just kind of sums it up. He is the best player in town. He never mentions strategy because he knows it. He knows there's no point.
He's not originally from South Africa, though, right?
He's not. A unique. He's from Serbia, from Belgrade. He's one of those war babies that, quite a story. He was 10, 12 years old when the war broke out in Serbia and Croatia. And his father, who was an engineer, was at work one day, and he went out to lunch, and the army came to get him to say, hey, you got to go to war. So his secretary got hold of him and said, hey, they came for you. You got to go to war. And so then his dad came home that night and says, listen, I got to leave. So he went to South Africa. He thought he had a job in South Africa, and said, well, look, I'm going to come get you, or I'm going to go to South Africa, I'm going to start up a new life, and you can come in 2 or 3 months. So he went to South Africa, and Nenad didn't speak a word of English, and went from him and his mother went to South Africa. Now his mother is a math professor, and she worked in a factory sewing socks in South Africa because that's all they could do. They had enough money to last about 6 months. The dad job that he thought he had didn't work out, so he's an engineer, software engineer, and so he was fixing TVs. Mum was sewing socks. Nenad couldn't speak a word of English. It was right when apartheid was breaking out. So we've gone from one war-torn country to another war-torn country. Anyway, they made it, and Nenad played tennis in South Africa, became the number 1 player in South Africa, under 16, number 1 player in the whole of continent, actually, of Africa, and then came to the U.S. to play college tennis, played at the University of Tulsa. So, we've become really very, very dear friends over the last 10, 15 years, and it's a pleasure to work with him, So, yeah.
No, I can tell by the way you speak about him that it's a great working relationship, and as you said, that relationship's extended off the court.
Yeah.
I find, or at least what I've seen in South Florida many times, is that on-court relationships, partnerships with other coaches don't often last too long for many reasons. I could just interject with my opinion that most tennis players are, being an individual sport, are a little bit selfish and usually have pretty big egos. But we've had myself with my business partner and on-court partner, Allington from England as well, has been an invaluable relationship to me. I hope he would say the same thing if I was that, if someone were to ask him how he feels about me. But could you just elaborate maybe on the rarity and the importance of, say, I know there's a lot of tennis parents and, of course, tennis players who listen to this, but I know there's also a lot of young tennis coaches that listen to this podcast. Could you maybe elaborate on the importance of and the value that having an on-court partner can bring to that working relationship?
Yeah, I can. Well, you can certainly bounce off each other. I think just going back to being a young tennis coach, probably I'll get into partners and things like that. But when I first came to California, and I worked for a very minimum amount of money. I think it was guaranteed $600 a month, and I was working 8-10 hours a day on the court. So it was pretty much almost internship type money. And obviously it changed very quick though, as we built the business, and I became almost a partner with Sam very, very quickly. We saw the value, saw the hard work, and we became very, very good friends very, very quickly. And then we became partners in tennis where we had a few different facilities. So yeah, that was invaluable. I think egos get involved, and if you can leave your ego at the door, and Vic always used to tell me, Mark, take your working life very, very serious, but don't take yourself too serious. And I think that's what Nen and I try to do. We, and we are quite lucky again because Nen has also has been able to buy some real estate. He has some apartments in LA that over the last 10 years he's developed, and we've helped him kind of navigate through that world. And so he has a lot of stress off that way too. And that could be a reason why we get along so well as well, because we aren't really, we'll run group lessons, and half the time, we don't even know who's paying who, so it's so loose that, and I like it that way. It doesn't become about the dollar. No, don't get me wrong. We are getting paid, and we need to get paid. But I think just values. We value each other's opinions, and we respect each other's opinions. I know when he's having a bad day. I know when he's down in tennis and he wants to pull his hair out. So we do spin off that way. When I'm having a bad day, I'm tired of tennis, I want to quit. He pulls me around, and I do vice versa. I do the same for him. So, it's really important to, if you're going to stay in the tennis business, just do the right things, and the money will come. If you keep, stick to your principles, keep working hard, the money will start to, come, and the financial reward will be there. In various ways.
I used to always preach, profit versus people. People do ask me, you talk about pulling your hair out. Unfortunately, I don't have any hair to pull out anymore. But with people ask me, Steve, what do you do? And I say, I fight ignorance every day. It's just amazing. Three really good kids today. It's raining, and it's some kids have to get to the grocery store, and there's some logistics. So there's three kids whose parents are picking them up. And, the Brandon's facility with his partner is amazing. So they have this beautiful gym, and there's mirrors. And I said, well, and the floor is clear. One of his physical therapists is there. And so it's plenty of space. I said, just be quiet, go back there and shadow swing. Your parents will be here in 20 minutes. And they pull out their phones. And it's like they call their parents to come and pick them up. So then one dad comes and next one dad says, guys, you sit down and visit with me. Your girls did the wrong thing. They were told go shadow swing for 20 minutes. And those are the things today, technology is not perfect, but so I can understand where there's frustrations. Vic used to say is people burn people out. Tennis doesn't burn people out. If burnout's really frustration factor, and the player can be frustrated, but the teacher can be frustrated too, because if you're telling a kid, if he's in the million time club and you keep telling him the same thing, then with the parents, a pro could go out and give a 60-minute lesson, and then within 6 seconds, it's derailed by the parents.
Yeah.
Maybe yet it's a 90-minute workout, and within 9 minutes in that car ride home is, what was the score? Who was in your group?
Yeah, that's right.
Just all the wrong questions. That term, conscientious neglect.
Yeah.
You don't need to be climbing the fence as a tennis parent.
Yeah. But one thing with Nenad is, from his upbringing, we do have some fun on the court. For example, he can't understand when a parent or a player is asking a tennis coach, why I lost that tennis match, or almost blaming a tennis coach, or what do I do next? He's just not from that school of thought where he grew up. You wouldn't dare ask a tennis coach that question. It's like he's from, obviously grew up in Serbia, and it's a little bit of, the older boys beating up on the younger boys. You just wouldn't open your mouth in front of a tennis coach because you would just get hammered. So being in America, he just nods his head. We had one the other day. He was, how these kids, they're looking for better matches all week long. And then it had a great line. He goes, look, all you do all week is you look for players that are better than you. And then you get to a tournament and you play a good player, and suddenly it's a bad draw. So what are you looking for? You got the player you wanted to play, and now you got a bad draw. What is the matter with you? So we deal with that stuff all day long, and then it has some really quite sharp one-liners that get out of here.
That's well put. You mentioned his son Liam. How's Liam doing? He came to work with
serve. Yeah, he's doing okay. He's actually in your neck of the woods at the moment. He's in Naples playing one of those UTRs. Doing okay. He had that tough year. 2021 was not a good year, obviously with COVID, and he had some sickness, some injuries, and he's a tough kid. He's a little bit of a wild animal, but he's a super kid, and he's 16, and he's playing some of those pro UTRs. He's getting invited to play those and getting some good experience, and it's kind of too bad because in SoCal that there are some 16 and 17-year-olds that are actually quite high ranked, but none of them play the tournaments with each other. You've got the Kyle Kane and some of these Alex Michelson and a lot of these players that are probably top 10 in the country, but they never ever play the same event. And so you got to, it's like we were saying earlier, Liam, a kid that's maybe 12 plus UTR type level, he's got to go look for tournaments,
I think kids have got programmed out. It's really sad what's happened to high school tennis in America. Now a lot of kids are homeschooled and they don't play high school tennis. That expression where the individuals become bigger than the program. But kids don't even play each other. So, you get two kids that are practicing at a facility. They're both very good. And it's like, how many sets are you playing? So that's where kids can be programmed out. That's where I think, Dave Secker's question about academy tennis versus club-based, where you take a lesson from a well-trained tennis teaching professional, just like piano. You take the 1 hour lesson, then you go hit the backboard, you do baskets with a friend, and you play.
Well, he's also going to give you the blueprint of how to do it. He's going to tell you what not to do. A top teaching pro will tell you, don't do that. Don't worry about that particular program. Don't get wrapped up in that world. And a lot of it is, not doing what doing things that you shouldn't be doing. Just get on with the basics. Get on with the you should be playing this amount of sets. Play these tournaments. So there's not much of that anymore, where a coach, is in charge of your game and he makes decisions in your game. There's just a lot of academies where, the coach is some ex-college player that's just started coaching, and he's trying to make his way, and the kid really isn't getting much, seasoned advice.
How about your experience with the USTA? Let's go in that direction. I do think I met someone. Met someone this past weekend who works for the USTA, and again, there's a lot of great people, a lot of great causes, but you've obviously you're still working with juniors. How about the juniors you've worked with that?
Over the years,
before '87, there was no player development program. But how about the players that you've worked with? How's that gone in general? Maybe not to get into specifics, but with players that have been kidnapped by the USTA.
Yeah, well, back in the day, like when you mentioned, player development started sort of in the '90s, where they had 6 boys and 6 girls, and they would call that the national team. And I think it was it Nick Saviano and I think Lynn Rowley, they were sort of running that program, and that was really sort of the national program. And actually, that program we did have 3 or 4 kids that were in that program, where they would maybe take the kids overseas, or they would do some training camps. And look, back in those days, we probably had a bigger ego, so we weren't happy about it. We weren't happy that, and we just didn't understand that, let's say, a kid would be going off to Florida for 2 or 3 day training camp. We just didn't see the value of it, And the reason is that the first thing is that the parent and the kid has their head turned, and the head's turned with things like wild cards and training camps and hey, you can come play with the Davis Cup player and all this sort of thing. And you take the kid out of an environment that is having success. So, the USTA suddenly is becoming our competitor. So, it makes you angry. Yeah, it makes you a little bit bitter. And what happens is, as a coach, when they start getting recruited by the USTA, I'll be honest, you lose a little bit of interest in that player. And you become the bad guy, because the parent will start saying, well, hey, you just want the best for the kid. Why don't you want the best for the kid? And you're a little bit bitter as a tennis coach, because now the kid's only in your program twice a week versus he was in your program 4 times a week. Or the kids are looking at that thinking, hey, where's so-and-so? And that, now I know that the USTA have tried to getting coaches involved, but it really isn't happening. I have a couple of kids that get invited to USTA, and I get put on the maybe the link for what's happening. But there's no coaches calling me. There's no dovetailing with each other as far as what's working and who's working on what. They're basically running a program, and they're trying to, same as an academy, they're trying to retain some kids. We have here in Southern California what they call USTA West at the Carson Center. It's been open since probably 97, 98, something like that. And the idea was Elliot Telcher, former top 10 player, was going to, get all these top players together, and pros could come and practice, and maybe some juniors. And so you probably had about, I would say, 15 different people try to get that place up and running. And it just doesn't work, because, in my opinion, it should be scrapped. It doesn't work. But anyway.
Well, let's stay on that for a second. We scrapped. A lot of people are, the money that's being spent and what's been produced. We actually interviewed Javier Palenque. He is the biggest critic of the USTA, and he's got a big heart for tennis. One thing you mentioned, Nick Saviano. I was on a speaking panel with Nick Saviano at Fair State, and of course, when he was with the USTA, Michael Chang, Pete Sampras, and Jim Courier, they're young kids. They're representing the U.S. maybe in the 14s, especially on special events. So he can just drop their name, say, well, when I was coaching these kids, Mark Kovacs, I was on a PTR docket with him one time where he can do the same thing now where, okay, he taught Riley Opelka how to serve. Well, maybe he did. or he taught TFO because Tommy Paul, he was just with them. And the consumer, the name dropping, that in every walk of life, the name dropping, I think that's not a good thing. But I actually think it's un-American to invite somebody. And a lot of kids are getting invited, because they have good size. Someone Brandon knows, fellow upstate New Yorker, Jeremy Wertzman, he had a growth spurt. I mean, he ended up being number one in the NCAAs. But when he won the 14s, he was a big boy. And I know actually you were out in, I was in Southern Cal when Taylor Dent was being pushed around by Phil Dent at the John Wayne Tennis Club in a baby stroller. But so when, just like you just mentioned about one of your players, I think it was Kevin Kim, where he wins the Southern Cal sectional, but the Bryan brothers and who else did you mention was at Junior Wimbledon? Maybe it was Pete, but no, that would be a different age group. But anyway, we always say that winning's not confusing; it's totally confusing. But I just, a lot of these kids are getting invited because they have really good size, or they're showing some athleticism. I mean, they actually have had people that have had the title. They're an ID specialist. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how it is, but ID for identification, But I really think that the German word or the compound word Kreismeister, circle champion, is, I don't think really at the grassroots level people should be recruiting. Like when you said, recruit and retain, we always say the merchant of flesh, the person who's at the junior tournaments handing out business cards. Yeah. And then the consumer gets confused because, they think the glorified sparring partner, their child's getting to bang the ball with some guy who can hit it. Just goes round and round in circles. But no, it's interesting.
I can add a little bit to that. We've had various players from top players to the middle level players that have been recruited by the USTA, and just the money that is spent. For example, just last week I had a young 11-year-old that they paid for the kid. Oh, that's me. They paid for the kid, the parent, to fly to Florida for a 2-day tennis camp where she played a few tennis matches. I apologize, that's my phone. They played a few tennis matches.
We lose you?
I think we lost him there.
Okay, now we get to test my telephone skills.
Can Steve Smith make a phone call?
It's not easy. The machine is only as smart as its operator. Maybe it's good that I wait a second here.
You used to have one of those, put your finger on your rotary.
Yeah, the rotary phone.
Sorry about that, Steve. Lost you on that one.
No problem.
My bad. Anyway.
Yeah, you're saying about the kid who went for 2 days, they fly 3,000 miles from one coast to the other?
Yeah, 3,000 miles for a 2-day tennis camp. And I'm asking myself, I'm adding that up, and that's probably about a $3,000 or $4,000 weekend for that one player. And I asked, well, how many players were there? And I think she maybe said, 20 players coming from all over the region, all over the country. So I'm thinking, it's got to be close to $100,000 weekend. And I said, well, what happened? And she goes, well, we played some doubles, and we had some guy come around and talk about mental toughness, and we all played a couple of single sets, and we did a few drills, and then they played on clay. So I'm just thinking, my goodness.
No, tennis is what. It's great to watch the football game last night with what the football culture, the tennis culture. Well, we're having a little bit of fun here. So the USTA, they're not going to hire you, or maybe Brandon. Brandon's a young guy. Maybe they'll hire Brandon, but they're not going to hire you or me. We're too old. You get to a certain point where they're not going to hire the old guy. But
Mark, if they hired you, would you accept the job?
It's an interesting point. And then it says that. And then it's been quite close to little jobs like that. And he's like, there's no way I would take that job. Yeah.
I know my answer.
We, back in the day, some interesting ones And I think it was better back in the day because at least people were talking about strokes and talking about play development in a way that we talk about it. We had, and Sam had a player, a young girl that was number one in the country, and a young girl that she number one in the country at 14, and she was number one in the 18s, and she came into our program where because a lot of the boys were good volleyers, and the mother thought, well, hey, can you teach my kid how to volley like these boys? And so the mother's watching the kid, watching all the boys hit tennis balls, and she asked us, well, what do you think of my daughter's game? And let me just say, she didn't have a very good game. Technically, it was the rackets going over her head, open racket faces, but she's an incredible trier, incredibly fast. And so she was on the national team. And so we said, look, what's the goal here? Do you want to play college tennis? Do you want to be a professional player? And she says, I want to be a professional player. And so we said, listen, this girl needs her game to be completely rebuilt. If she has any, because she's not a big girl, if she has any chance of being a professional tennis player. So the USTA were like, no way, you should never change this girl's game. So she went with us and she changed the game, and it started with drop hitting tennis balls. I actually taught her mother how to drop hit tennis balls. This girl's number one in the country in the 18s. So she drop hit tennis balls. And this is the hardest working player I've ever had. And Sam. So Sam would teach her twice a week. I'd teach her twice a week. She'd drive all the way from Northridge, which is about 2 hours, up to Orange County, drop hitting tennis balls for 5 hours a day, all day, 6 hours a day, sometimes all day, 8 hours a day, drop hitting. Then we'd start to feed tennis balls. Anyway, so cut a long story short, she did win the U.S. Open in juniors. She, made it in tennis as a professional, got around about 60 in the world. Now, look, I don't know, maybe she'd have made it anyway. But our background in tennis, we had no problem and such confidence in taking that player and rebuilding a stroke and starting over, because we knew there's no way that game's going to hold up. And so backtracking, Steve, that's what Tennis Tech did for us. It gives us the ability to look at a player and say, and you mentioned Kevin Kim. Kevin used to have a two-handed backhand. He lost in the final of sectionals playing with a two-handed backhand when he was 11 years old. And I sat down with the dad, and it wasn't that good of a two-handed backhand. I said, let's give this kid a one-hander. It's better. First day, let's go. The confidence to have no problem building a one-handed backhand. Kevin won Kalamazoo, played Rafa at the French Open, played Federer at Miami, got to 60 in the world. Again, our background from Tennis Tech gave us that ability to say, right, here I go, no problem. Day one, I can give this kid a nice backhand. So
I think with that, the parents have to. I hate the expression "buy in," but do they get it? No, I was mentioning football culture. I tease Patrick. Can't pronounce his name anyway. So Mortagulu. So Patrick Monegulu. He's actually paying Serena. I mean, that's ass backwards. Jose Garris, who does have a lot to offer, but I've had a half dozen kids that have flown to Southern California. They go out to the desert, and they're young, where the parent has to go with them, and so the airfare, the rent-a-car, the hotel, and when Patrick McEnroe was the general manager, he wasn't at player development; he was in New York. So lots of money that's been misspent. And I think that's un-American. I think it should just be poured into education. And I remember way back when Rod Woods, Kathy Woods, Ron Woods, he has this bright guy, educated, PhD, and he was the first director of player development. And then actually, it sounds so egotistical, but what we put together, there's still, USA is still trying to come up with a certification program, because now for years, they didn't have anything to do with the PTR, the USPTA. In fact, at one point, Paul Rodert was connected, I mean, still he's back for the third time. So I have a meeting with Austin Krajicek's father, Rob Krajicek, and it's just going in circles. I mean, the tennis court's a rectangle. Let's go through. This is the grip. This is the shape of the swing. These are the variables for topspin. It goes back to Braden's book in '77. But that's where, like in football, there's a Lombardi sweep, or there's, granted the sport has evolved, but there's still respect for Lombardi, or the basketball coach who came up with the Princeton triangle.
Yeah. Well, you look at that game last night. You look at that's like running a corporation. The way those football programs are ran, and they're run by like fantastic coaches. The USTA, and I know this fact, will the committee will sit around a round table and say, well, does anybody know McEnroe? And does anybody know Patrick McEnroe? What's he doing these days? Could you imagine running a multi-million dollar company and just throwing out that and just and this is how we're going to run our tennis? Does somebody know this guy? No, first of all, they don't even know what he's doing. Is he doing tennis? Is he in tennis? And that's how they're deciding on. They want that big name, which is fine. You could have a big name and have you, but my goodness, could you imagine Georgia football team being run like that?
My oldest brother used to send when he was the NHL GM, he would send the head coach to the New York Giants. Just how their staff would work together. Senior moment, I could have the name wrong. Brent Salzer. I met him, sat down, talked to him. He came out to visit one time. He became very good friends with Matt Clore. He was taught tennis by Joey Johnson, but he has a career. He really got into studying the body and fitness, and he has a background in pro football. He was hired by the USTA, and during the pandemic, they let him go. And to me, that's the guy they should have hired. When he met with me, I said, what I would recommend is take your background in football and try to present it to the American public. Because we've got kids that are playing tennis that can't do a push-up. They can't do a sit-up. They just don't do any fitness. Let me ask you this.
Let me just finish with one. I'll finish with one thing with the USDA player development. What I would do, and this is maybe a little radical, but when I go to the Carson and I go to some of these national training centers, and you've got many coaches, you've got many fitness trainers, you've got many clerical workers, you've got all of it. It seems like there's so much staff. The first thing I would do is nobody can work here unless you can feed a tennis ball. Right? You've got to. I want everybody to be able to go out and feed a tennis ball. And then someone that has fed a tennis ball, you'll know it right away. You'll know right away if that person's been in tennis. Now, I'm not saying that particular person has to be, on the court with all the players, but they know what it takes. Get rid of all this, peripheral stuff. Just get the people that understand that world. And it's not that complicated, but boy, we make it complicated, Steve.
Well, I think people grow away from it. It's a lot easier to not put on the sunscreen and not go out and go to work. And as we say, a trench pro, you get the shovel and you start digging the ditch. The foundation, you have to get out there and get your hands dirty. I think if there's a lot of people that are making decisions in tennis, and I always say, well, they haven't put sunscreen on in 25 years. And they're making decisions on player development.
Well, you can just tell, all I need to see him is feed a tennis ball, and I know that person hasn't spent any time in player development. I don't need to know what they know about tennis. I know.
Well, then another thing too is that yourself, Brandon and I were going through the different types of tennis pros. You're teaching anybody and everybody. You're not recruiting. You're developing. You're developing a local kid that wants some help.
Yeah. I wouldn't know how to recruit. It's one of those. I've never recruited players. What would I say? What would you say, Steve? Would you walk up to someone and say, "Hey, I want to work on your game"? I mean, how do they? The audacity to walk up to another coach's player and think that, well, I can turn your kid's game around. Yeah?
Steve got on his private jet when I was 15 and, flew up to Schenectady, New York and recruited me. So I don't know what you're talking about.
There you go. There you go. But
go ahead.
No, you got it. Go on.
I was going to say, well, if I was a college coach, I would go to the tournament, go to the nationals and go, well, why don't you come be on my team and we won't let you hit a ball for the first month. We're not going to let you play for the first year. Actually, we'd like to have you red shirt, and that's what they do in pro. That's what they do in college football.
Right. Yeah,
it's like the quarterback last night. They're just trying to pull the kid who went as a walk-on, didn't work out. University of Georgia, plays junior college ball, then he goes back and he's a backup. And it was really great. I have to see this on YouTube, where he basically said the woman was just trying to pull out, because he's the underdog. It's a great home run story. He said, well, basically you got to shut up, sit down, and do what you're told. And that does, unfortunately, that doesn't exist so much. I mean, I reprimand coaches when they call a 12-year-old their client. They're still a student. But go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, no, I've got a few questions here. It seems like with your partner, he goes by Nash, or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, Nash. Yeah, Nash. You got it. Yeah.
So he's kind of gotten to this level as a player where he played at a big time school and played in the pros. And then of course I know that you played college tennis yourself, but maybe not to the same level. When you look at coaches who played to that level versus maybe, again, of course, I think most of us have played, but what do you think that the skill sets as a coach, how they translate to working with players, the strengths and the weaknesses as you've seen, and how that balance? I think obviously you guys have the best of both worlds to have that set up. But could you talk a little bit about that? And I think that can really help parents who are looking for a coach or maybe think it's time to make a change. Yeah.
Well, look, being a very good player like Nenad is definitely a feather in his cap. But I'll be honest, he doesn't. That's not why he's a good coach. He doesn't. Most people don't even know that he played at that level. We had. It was quite funny. A while ago, we had Kevin Kim over, and he was just sitting and stuff, and they were talking, and nobody knows who he is. And some kid was mentioning, like, wow, playing Rafa on imagine playing Rafa on French Open, and Nenad goes, no, that guy over there did. Like, so unless you're a big time tennis player, I don't think it matters. I really don't think when you get to the level of coach that Nenad is, it doesn't matter. Yes, it's a feather in the cap. He has some nice stories, but and I think when you see him hit a tennis ball, it's very, very. It looks great. But so I lost my train of thought there. What was the question? I'm sorry.
No, really, just as far as
I'm getting old, Steve.
The backgrounds, I think, and too, just from a consumer's perspective, like you said, I mean, they hear of that resume as a player, but at the same time, if you necessarily haven't played Wimbledon, what might be the advantages of a coach who hasn't played at that level?
Well, I think from my own experience, I think I'm in the trenches every single day. And I don't think of tennis that way. I think of tennis. I honestly don't think of tennis that way. And I don't really get intimidated anymore with stories or with players. If the guy's talking about his life as a tennis professional. I think if you have confidence in yourself and you've spent years and years on the court with players. That becomes more important than the stories. No, I'm not, don't get me wrong. It's a huge feather in your cap if you're a very, very good tennis player. But I think parents ultimately will see through it. Here's what I do. Here's what I say to parents when they're looking for a coach. I say, go watch a tennis lesson and ask a tennis coach, what's the theme of the lesson here? What are you doing? Are you working on footwork? Are you working on strokes? Are you working on this? And if the coach gives you a basic formula, like, yeah, we're just working on some fundamentals. We're trying to get the right grips, the right swings. We're trying to get the right topspin on the ball. We're trying to get some consistency. That coach will know about strategy. That coach will know about all the other stuff that a parent thinks they're not getting from that coach. They are getting that from that coach. If he knows that side of tennis, he's going to know the other side of tennis. I'm not a big believer in you think you're going to go to this coach that's a former player and he's going to turn your game around. I don't think so. Yeah, he'll tell you hit a lot of balls, work hard, get after it. We tell our players that for free every day. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but
no, it really does. No, it's I think it's a great answer. So basically, if a parent asks that question and watched the lesson, and the coach's first thing out of their mouth is, "Well, when I played Rafa at French Open, you should run away."
That's right. It's no good. It's just it'll fizzle out after a while. You've got to get to the nuts and bolts of the tennis. And if a kid, like I said, if a coach is just running a kid hard and the kid's swinging all over the place and can't make 3 balls in a row, then that's not really a tennis lesson. That's just a cheerleader out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've thrown the USTA under the bus. We've been politically incorrect.
Sorry about that.
No, sorry.
Hey, we did. Hey, at least we didn't use any bad language, though, Steve, right?
Yeah, where Javier Plinko is saying that the mid-managers are making more than the Supreme Court justices. So, the money that's being spent, accountability. Let me get more trouble here and be racial. I do think this is an original line. The best. I used to say that, and this is not anti-Semitic, although people would think it is. Like, oh, did he say that? The best Jewish coaches in the world, or the best coaches in the world, are Jewish moms. They cultivate achievement. You're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, or you will die. And so you're out in Southern Cal where there's a lot of Asians, and now the Battle Hymn of the Mother Tiger. I think we all need to read the book, and they've outdone the Jewish mom. And I meet a Chinese mom, I go right up and go, "Well, I know you're on top of math, but is it piano or violin?" Now, Dave Fish, I one time made a video. For several years, I made videos for the women's team. Now, he's always been in charge of the men's team. One year, 8 out of 9 girls on the team had an Asiatic background. So I guess they worked on math in the summer. They got into Harvard. So the question is, okay, you're doing math, but what about violin or piano? And Fish told me when we put together the course Tennis Intelligence Applied, 25 hours, he said some people are just going to totally get into this. And you think they would, but it's like the Germans that have built all these really nice cars. They didn't invent the bicycle, but they perfected it. A country that doesn't really have that many natural resources. But, to have been in Germany, I one time was in Berlin for 3 summers in a row doing a program for coaches. In the 4th summer, I wasn't invited back because the people that owned the facility, they rented courts to the federation. And the federation told them, if you have that guy come back, we're not going to rent any more courts from you. So there's there's definitely politics come into it. But now on the racial side is it, so it's a new culture. And we've had so many successful immigrants. And these, it's not to categorize anyone, but there's a lot of kids. And certainly I tell Indian kids as well that you're going to have all straight A's and high SAT score, but they're not going to get into such and such college. But what advice would you have for Asian parents? Vic Braden used to always say, well, you can't tell them directly. I mean, there's two ways to use the pronoun you. Like, Flanagan, you are doing this. But if you're in a group with 20 coaches and say, this is what you're doing. But what comes to your mind when you think of, because there's so many Asiatic kids in Southern Cal?
Well, the majority of players over the years have definitely been, Asian American players. I would say, the tournaments, you're probably talking 40 to 50% of the kids are Asian, Korean, Chinese, that sort of thing. The one thing I would say with the Asian players, the hand-eye coordination actually is quite good at a young age. I mean, you look how many Korean girls are dominating golf. There are some. There's got to be something in that. I know there is a lot of dads out there that are feeding the kids, making the kids hit thousands of golf balls every day. But there's got to be something in as far as they're quite, good hand-eye coordination. I do spend a lot of my days with the Asian kids, and the parents and the mothers are obviously the Tiger mothers are very, very involved in the day-to-day life of these kids, and they a lot of them treat tennis like an SAT test. They think they've got this thing licked, and then what happens is as they get into the older age groups, and suddenly it's like, well, I didn't see this coming. What's happening here? And as the kids maybe had a lot of success in the younger age groups that start to fall off, then the school becomes the number one. But I don't know. I think probably the most success I've had has been with American Korean players. That particular one that we mentioned, Kevin. School wasn't important to him, so tennis was number one, school was number two. Most of them are, school is one, which it should be. We're not saying, but they do tend to fall off. I have to say, they do tend to fall away when the school becomes. An interesting one was I was with Kevin and a guy called Eric Lin. We went to the Indian Wells tournament one year when it was actually the Hyatt before they had that big new facility, and we were all driving home, and they were about 15 and 16 years old. And I asked the boys, I said, "So what do you think, guys? You guys think you'd want to do that for a living?" And Kevin was like, "Yeah, absolutely, I want to do that." And Eric was like, "I don't know about that. That sounds like a lot of travel. Not sure if want to be away that long." Now, both paths, Kevin, and actually Eric was a more talented player than Kevin. In my opinion, was a better tennis player. He won Kalamazoo doubles. He played for UCLA. Was a very, very good tennis player. Played the US Open in juniors. And so what happened was Kevin made it in tennis, relative. He made a couple of $1 million and played some nice top 50, 60 level tennis for a couple of years. Eric ended up being an orthopedic surgeon. So, Kevin, now he's had to get back into the working world. Eric became an orthopedic surgeon. So who did it right? I don't know. Kevin had some great experiences in life. Eric is, he's pushed on a different way. Both very similar stories. So I think the Korean community, they're very competitive. They're very structured, and they're obviously doing something right because they're obviously successful, and they do things right. Though from a young age, from 7, 8, they're disciplined, and they get them into these sports, and they study. I mean, I remember having a couple of Asian players where both girls got perfect scores on the SAT. One kid would come out and take a tennis lesson while the other kid waited and brought a standout and would do homework at the side of the court, and then they would switch off because they didn't want to waste that hour. So, there's something in that, but does it translate to professional tennis? I'm not quite sure.
One thing with the IT industry, there's so many people here from India. And one of our students years ago worked for the BAT program, Britannica Arbitrage Tennis. And what they were trying to do throughout India, Mrs. Arbitrage passed away a few years ago, but they were basically trying to teach families, how did she do it? And so you can be a student athlete. How can you do it? But I think that's where there's balance. I think of mainline Philadelphia. I've worked with so many kids from mainline Philadelphia where, how many AP classes are you going to take?
Yeah.
So you don't have to take all AP classes. But I've had students who've taken AP classes and not taken the test because they're going to go to college. They didn't exist years ago. There was no such thing as an AP class. And, why do you have to get ahead of yourself and get all these credits? Why can't you, like I went to a boarding school where different sport every season. But I think also to the Asians, very quiet in public, but behind closed doors, too much pressure to win.
Yeah.
What would your comment for that be?
No, absolutely. They play off as we're not taking that this seriously, and we're working on study and stuff. But yeah, very much so. And it backfires. It definitely backfires because the kid starts to not love tennis. It becomes about the parents. And even at the very highest level, I don't want to give too much away, but there's been some situations where the kids now in their 40s and they're not still not talking to the parents from the experience they had in junior tennis.
Yeah.
So yeah. Go ahead.
Jose Garrett's great line for the 12s. Somebody has to win. Somebody has to win, and it is unhealthy that now it's the UTR. Before that, it was tennis recruiting. You go to a tournament now. I got a tough draw. I'm playing a 7. I'm playing an 8, and it's like shut up. And then it was a few years back is I had to play a 5-star. I had to play a 4-star. Mm-hmm. And it really is unhealthy. It shouldn't be. Money is made on that. And then the USTA. I mean, certainly so many people working so hard where they've changed the ranking system around. They didn't really, I don't think, ever really step up and go, hey, we're going to have a combined singles and doubles ranking. They did at one point here in Florida. It was 15% of your ranking would be based on doubles. But, kids would have a really good win the first few months of the year, then they would go into hiding. And, it's almost like sport has become too structured. Whatever happened to, pick up tennis. But no, I do think that, we have listeners and with, Jim Lair, pressure's a good guy, recovery's a bad guy. But when it comes down to, I think, pressure to work versus pressure to win. And I think actually then there's a lack of understanding. And you see that incompleteness at even the pro game now where, of course, there's not the money in doubles or not the emphasis in doubles, but we have all these at the highest level of tennis. They have people have incomplete games. We used to say a Finnish player is someone who could finish at the net. Now a Finnish player is from Helsinki. And but let's wrap it up here. Brandon, a couple more questions?
Yeah, what do you say to a little lightning round here? Are you game?
Sorry, I missed that. Say it again.
A little lightning round, kind of just real quick responses.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, no problem.
Well, I'll preface the first phase of the lightning round here. You still have a very strong allegiance to British tennis players. I know you've been in this country for a long time.
No,
not much at all.
No, I don't. Completely lost touch, and I haven't been back actually in quite a few years because of obviously COVID and stuff. But obviously, I do know some of the coaches and some of the guys that are still involved in tennis, but no allegiance at all.
Let me ask you this. You saw that Emma Raducanu lost the other day, 6-0, 6-1.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't.
Yeah, I saw that.
What's your initial gut reaction to that result?
First thing was changing coaches right away. I mean, that sounds like she's had another coach from, the original guy that she had, I think it was Richardson. Seemed like it was a nice matchup, and maybe she feels like she needs something different. But time will tell. Stress, pressure. What the British media is like. Once they get a good tennis player, she's under the microscope every single minute she steps on the court. So pressure's on. She does have a nice game, though. I have to say, I do like the way she strikes the tennis ball. But as you know, tennis can do weird things to you.
Yeah. I know he's just a Scotsman, but Andy Murray, what chances do you give him of winning another major tournament? Maybe not a Grand Slam.
No. Well, I about 3 years ago, I had a hip replacement, I'm in my mid 50s, so I think I had it maybe when I was 51 or something like that. He's had the same thing. I don't know how he's getting around the court. It's remarkable. I got to take my hat off to the guy. He's out there battling with a fake hip. It is unbelievable. So winning, I don't know, but maybe he can make the second week.
One more British player who I really personally like. How good is Dan Evans underspin back?
Yeah,
I was about to call it slice back, but Steve would kill me.
Yeah,
so.
That's all right. Oh, he's fantastic. Little guy, what, 5'9"? I have heard some stories that when he does go back to the UK and jumps into some of the national training camps, he just brings up the level of intensity.
Yeah.
When he steps on the court, he's just super, super excited about hitting balls. And you can tell by the way he plays. All court player. It's all the shots. He's a shot maker. It's fun to watch. He's a good one. I like him. I think he enjoys a beer or two as well. So I don't know.
I've heard that as well. This one is not about British tennis, but more about tennis coaching. Tennis coaching again. Yeah. Just very quick word association. The number one skill as a coach besides teaching technique. What do you think it is?
Number one, I would say being positive. As a young coach, I was very negative, and I found it just didn't work. So there's no doubt about it. I think yes, you have to be a little bit tough on a player, but I think the more positive you are, the more excited you are about the kid's game, it shows up. So yeah, be very positive. It's hard though. Sometimes it's hard, and as Steve knows, it's not that easy, right, Steve?
Yeah, for sure. A couple follow-ups on that. I mean, I agree with Murray. Watching him play, I'm pulling for Murray. I mean, he's a warrior. He's out there. It's absolutely amazing. With Emma, I feel like I was stalking Emma and just try to, read as much about her as I could. And she just needs to go back to whoever taught her because she hits the ball so well. And I think what happens is the player doesn't change. The people around the player changes. And actually, Dan Evans, I love his game. I was once at Saddlebrook, local player, Austin Krychek. I was working with him. I've known him since he was 7, but there was a time where I was helping him when he was on the tour. And the coach, Liam Smith, asked me, he goes, "Can you just run practice?" And he just was so frustrated with Evans. Evans, put himself in a little bit of trouble, was making a comeback. But actually with someone I just ran the practice, which was no problem. But with sometimes the horse, it's more difficult to break. So I think it's actually, I would love to, some kids I coach, I would love to see them turn and throw the racket at the fence and yell the F word. And because sometimes they're a little bit too complacent. And I think also too is the ones that ask questions, then they're questioning what you're telling them. Okay, why this, why that? I find a lot of times kids are only asking me, "When's lunch? Where are we going for lunch?" And they're really not taking ownership with their game. But no, it's been great to talk to you. I think the listeners will definitely find value in this, and it's great to talk to a trench pro who's principle based and still realizes that it's grip, swing, body. I mean, there's no, and I think that's something that our listeners. People need to develop a BS detector. It's just, we meet so many kids, they're 13 years old and they've been playing tennis for 5 years and their game's a train wreck. And I think that's where in tennis, instead of people competing against each other, is that if we could work together in tennis, maybe the competition for us is not each other, but it's X Games and other sports. And actually, I think even with that, the really young kids, instead of, and again, the red ball, orange ball, green dot, great training tools, but it's almost like tennis teaching has become a carnival. We're going to make it fun, and it's not working. It's not working. That expression, Vic Braden, where you can't fool a kid. 3 reading groups, the Robins, the Sparrows, and the Blue Jays. And the Blue Jays are the slow readers. They know they're the slow readers. And, once a kid can learn how to rally, then get connected with the game. But we're losing too many people. I think that the game is difficult, but if we just are straight up, and I appreciate you being a straight shooter, to say, hey, your kid has to learn tennis. And there's no quick fix, there's no shortcut, there's no Instagram or Facebook, follow this, follow that. What we're trying to do, and we're in that world of social media, just giving out free content, but there is no magic pill. There is no secret sauce.
Well, I always tell parents it's like watching grass grow. It really takes a while, and there's no quickness to this. It takes a long time, and take it easy. No rush. This banging on about winning in 12s and 14s. It's like, who cares? It's like, come on. No good player can even remember. Ask a really top player. Hey, do you remember playing any matches in the 12s? They'll be like, I can't even remember. I played tennis in the 12s. So it's
and if you ask them
anyway.
if they could go back, they would say they wouldn't get their knickers in a twist. They would
that's right.
do everything they can to improve.
Yeah, that's right.
But Mark, no, thank you very much. Anything else, Brandon?
No, thank you so much. I think the listeners are going to love this one. And
all right. Hope I didn't stir it up too much for you guys.
No, it's great. It's great.
No, you've done such a great job, Mark. I'm going to call the Queen and see if I could set up an appointment for you to have tea with her.
It's almost 70 years she's been on the throne there. It's the longest monarch of all time. She's quite a lady. I do like the Queen.
You and Dave Secker, that's great. Anyway, no, thanks a million.
Yeah, no problem.
Podcast
it's fun talking there.
All right,
you guys are doing a good job. Keep them going, okay?
All right, we'll keep trying. Thanks.
All the best, Mark. Hey, take care, fellas.
Yeah.
Good luck.
All right, podcast 75 in the books. Why don't you wrap it up, Flanagan? I'll shut up and put up.
It's all about the British accent. You got that British accent, just smooth like silk.
It does. We do fall for that hook, line, and sinker, don't we?
We do. It's got to be all the way back to the colonial times. I think they just got us.
That was great. I hope the listeners found value in that. It is principle based. That's really when it really comes right down to it. What do you base your teaching on? And just the facts, Jack.
No, you can tell by just the way he talks about tennis and coaching. He's very passionate, and you can see that he's doing his best to fight ignorance, as you say, but also just creating these great relationships with his players and trying to teach them fundamentals and keep it up. That's what we need.
Yeah, there was a
more
time,
guys like him.
There was a time in the 90s where, it's a consultation. No, it's not a consultation. You're not going to have a meeting. It's like, no, let's get out on the court and go to work. Let's go hit balls and hit balls better. All right, GreatBase Tennis podcast from the FM Tennis Performance Center.
You got it. In the books.
Boynton Beach.
Boynton Beach.
Adios, amigos.
Boynton Beach.
All right,
guys.
Thanks. Maybe we're over 3 hours. I don't know.
Close.
All right, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, listeners. You got to get through it. We do have some people that have let me know because we had Rolly Grossbaum, repping him for not listening to a couple of podcasts. I've had people reach out and go, they've listened to every one, and some more than just one time.
I know we just had Christmas. I'm going to get a Wrap It Up box. I'll have to show you the YouTube video. Wrap it up.
Chuck Creasy. I got to listen to Chuck Creasy because Andy Fitzell wants me to proof these. So I have to listen to these. But I'm going to love listening to Creasy. I'm going to love listening to Mr. Walpole.
All good stuff.
Adios. Good night. Thank you.